Single dad took the job nobody wanted at the Heartless Billionaire'S mansion and lived the best days of his life. She is widely known as the Ice Queen of Silicon Valley and America's most heartless CEO, and yet she stood in the doorway of her daughter's untouched room, watching a stranger's child play with toys that had been silent for 3 years, and for the first time since the funeral, Victoria Sterling felt her heart crack open. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I'm bringing you another story just as interesting and unforgettable as this one. And trust me, you won't want to miss it. Now let's continue. The alarm clock screamed at 5:47 a.m., 3 minutes before it was supposed to. Marcus Chin slammed his calloused palm against the snooze button, but sleep had already abandoned him hours ago. The thin walls of their cramped apartment in East LA carried every sound. Mrs. Rodriguez's television blaring Spanish soap operas, the couple upstairs arguing about rent money, and the constant hum of traffic on Cesar Chavez Avenue. He lay still for a moment, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that had grown bigger after last week's rain. The shape reminded him of a butterfly, which always made him think of Isabella. She used to say butterflies were messages from heaven, especially the yellow ones that visited their tiny balcony garden. "Daddy!" Zoe's sleepy voice drifted from the living room, where she slept on the pull-out couch. At 9 years old, she was already too perceptive for her own good. "You're thinking about Mommy again, aren't you?" Marcus's chest tightened. He pulled on his faded Levi's and a clean white t-shirt, one of only 2 he owned without paint stains or holes. "Just getting ready for work, Mija. Go back to sleep." "But it's Saturday," she whispered, her dark eyes peeking over the blanket. Those eyes were pure Isabella, warm, knowing, and far too wise for a child. "Daddy has an interview today, remember? The important one." He knelt beside the couch, brushing her black hair away from her face. She'd inherited Isabella's beauty, but thankfully had his stubborn chin. "Mrs. Chun from downstairs will watch you." Zoe sat up, her pink pajamas wrinkled from sleep. "Is it the scary lady's house? The one on TV?" Marcus winced. 2 weeks ago, Victoria Sterling had appeared on Channel 7 News, ruthlessly firing 3 executives on live television during a hostile takeover. The reporter had called her the Ice Queen of Silicon Valley and America's most heartless CEO. Even 9-year-old Zoe had watched in fascination as the billionaire destroyed careers without blinking. "She's not scary, baby. She's just important." The lie tasted bitter. Marcus had spent 3 sleepless nights researching Victoria Sterling online. At 34, she was worth $2.8 billion, had never been married, and had built her tech empire by crushing anyone who showed weakness. The job posting for her estate manager had been online for 6 months, a record that spoke volumes about her impossible standards. "Will you come home today?" Zoe asked, that familiar worry creeping into her voice. Ever since Isabella's death 18 months ago, she'd developed an intense fear of abandonment. Last month, when Marcus was 2 hours late from a construction job, he'd found her sobbing on the front steps, convinced he'd left her forever. "I'll always come home to you, Mija. Always." He pressed a kiss to her forehead, inhaling the scent of her strawberry shampoo, the one splurge he allowed himself each month. "Now sleep. Dream about ice cream and puppies." As Zoe settled back into the couch, Marcus moved to their tiny kitchen. The refrigerator hummed loudly, struggling to keep their meager groceries cold. He opened it to find exactly what he'd expected: half a gallon of milk, some leftover rice, and a single orange. The rent was due in 5 days. His construction job had ended last Friday, and his pride was barely holding together with duct tape and prayers. The Sterling estate job paid $85,000 a year, plus housing. It was more money than Marcus had ever imagined earning. But it also meant living in the world of a woman who made Gordon Ramsay look like a gentle grandfather. He pulled out his phone, its cracked screen reflecting the morning light filtering through their thin curtains. 23 missed calls from bill collectors. His thumb hovered over the voicemail icon, then moved away. Not today. Today was about hope, not shame. 300 miles north, in the hills of Malibu, Victoria Sterling stood in her marble-floored office, watching the sunrise paint the Pacific Ocean in shades of gold. The view was worth $12 million, according to her real estate agent. But Victoria had stopped noticing beautiful things 3 years ago, when beauty became a luxury she couldn't afford. Her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows showed a woman who'd weaponized perfection. Her platinum blonde hair was pulled into a flawless chignon, her black Armani suit tailored to intimidate, her red lipstick applied with military precision. At 34, she'd learned that vulnerability was a currency she couldn't spend. "Miss Sterling?" Her assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The candidate for the estate manager position is here. Marcus Chun." Victoria's jaw clenched. This was the 5th interview in 2 weeks. The first candidate had lasted 7 minutes before excusing himself. The second had actually cried when she'd explained the job requirements. The third had tried to negotiate before she'd even finished speaking. The fourth had been professionally competent, but had made the mistake of commenting on the sadness in her home. "Send him to the main foyer. I'll be down in 10 minutes." She moved through her mansion like a ghost haunting her own life. 23,000 square feet of perfection, designed by the same architect who'd created homes for movie stars and tech moguls. Every surface was pristine, every room temperature controlled, every detail planned to the smallest degree. It was a masterpiece of isolation. In the main foyer, she paused at the bottom of the curved staircase. The space was dominated by a massive chandelier that had cost more than most people's homes. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft hum of the air conditioning system. This was where she'd held her daughter's 3rd birthday party, where Charlotte had run in circles, her pink dress spinning like a flower, her laughter echoing off the marble walls. Where they'd played hide-and-seek among the expensive furniture, Victoria forgetting about board meetings and profit margins for precious stolen moments. The doorbell's chime cut through her memories like a blade. Victoria straightened her shoulders, pushed the past back into its locked compartment, and prepared to destroy another hopeful candidate. After all, that's what she did best. She opened the door and found herself face to face with a man who looked like he'd been carved from the same determination that had built her empire. Marcus Chun stood about 6'2", with broad shoulders that spoke of physical labor and warm brown eyes that held too much pain for someone his age. His clothes were clean but worn, his handshake firm but not presumptuous. "Ms. Sterling, I'm Marcus Chun. Thank you for this opportunity." His voice was steady, respectful without being servile. But it was what she saw behind him that made her breath catch in her throat. A little girl with dark hair and enormous eyes sat in the passenger seat of a battered Honda Civic, coloring in a book. She looked up at that moment, caught Victoria staring, and offered a shy wave. Something twisted in Victoria's chest, a sensation she'd forgotten how to name. "Mr. Chun," she said, her voice artificially cold. "I wasn't aware you'd be bringing guests." Marcus's cheeks reddened. "I apologize. My babysitter had an emergency, and I didn't want to cancel. My daughter will stay in the car. She has books and dash." "No." The word came out sharper than intended. Victoria saw the girl's face fall, and felt an unexpected stab of guilt. "I mean, it's too warm for her to wait in the car. She can come inside." What was she doing? Victoria Sterling didn't make accommodations for anyone, especially not for children who reminded her of everything she'd lost. But as Marcus helped his daughter out of the car, Victoria found herself studying the child's face. She wore a bright yellow sundress that had clearly been washed many times, and her sneakers were scuffed but clean. When she looked up at Victoria, her expression held no fear, only curiosity. "Thank you," Marcus said quietly. Zoe, this is Ms. Sterling. Can you say hello? Hello, Ms. Sterling, Zoe said, her voice soft but clear. Your house is really big. Do you ever get lost? Despite herself, Victoria almost smiled. Almost. No, I don't get lost. I know exactly where everything is. That's good, Zoe nodded seriously. My daddy gets lost sometimes when he's thinking about Mommy. But he always finds his way back to me. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She stared at this child who spoke of loss so matter-of-factly, and felt something crack in the walls she'd built around her heart. Mr. Chun, she said, her voice slightly unsteady. Let's begin the interview. As Marcus and Zoe followed Victoria through the marble corridors, both father and daughter were struck by the overwhelming silence of the place. It was beautiful, certainly, like walking through a museum exhibit titled, How the Other Half Lives. But it felt empty in a way that had nothing to do with space and everything to do with the absence of life. Victoria led them to her office, a glass-walled sanctuary that overlooked the ocean. Marcus tried not to gawk at the view, but Zoe had no such restraint. Wow, she breathed, pressing her nose against the window. It's like being in a cloud. Zoe, Marcus warned gently. Don't touch the glass. It's fine, Victoria said, though her voice remained carefully neutral. The windows are cleaned daily. She gestured for Marcus to sit in one of the leather chairs facing her desk. Zoe settled quietly in the corner, pulling out her coloring book and crayons from a small backpack. Mr. Chun, Victoria began, opening a folder that contained his resume. You have no experience in estate management. It wasn't a question. Marcus had expected this. No, ma'am. But I have 15 years of construction experience, 5 years of landscaping, and I've been managing apartment maintenance for the past 2 years. I'm reliable, I work hard, and I learn quickly. The position requires managing a staff of 12, overseeing a budget of $200,000 annually, and maintaining the grounds of a 15-acre estate. You'd be on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Victoria's blue eyes were glacial. The last 5 candidates found these requirements overwhelming. I understand, Marcus said steadily. I've read the job description multiple times. I'm prepared for the commitment. Are you? Victoria leaned back in her chair, studying him. The salary is generous, but the expectations are absolute. I don't accept excuses, explanations, or anything less than perfection. I've fired people for lesser infractions than showing up late or leaving early. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny? Marcus met her gaze without flinching. Ms. Sterling, I've been scrutinized my entire life. By bosses who thought I wasn't smart enough, by teachers who thought I wasn't ambitious enough, by a world that sees my skin color and my address and makes assumptions about my character. I've learned to let my work speak for itself. Something flickered in Victoria's expression, surprise, perhaps, or grudging respect. Daddy's the best worker in the whole world, Zoe said quietly from her corner, not looking up from her coloring. He fixed Mrs. Rodriguez's sink even though she couldn't pay him. And he built me a treehouse from what he found in the trash. And when Mommy was sick, he worked 2 jobs so she could stay home with me. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. Zoe, you don't need to dash. It's all right, Victoria said, her voice softer than before. She studied the child, who was coloring what appeared to be a rainbow with meticulous care. How old are you, Zoe? 9, Zoe replied, finally looking up. How old are you? Zoe, Marcus said quickly. You can't ask adults their age. Why not? Zoe tilted her head, genuinely curious. Adults ask me my age all the time. Victoria found herself answering despite her better judgment. I'm 34. That's not old, Zoe said with 9-year-old wisdom. My daddy is 32. Are you married? Zoe. Marcus stood up, mortified. I'm sorry, Miss Sterling. She's usually not this dash. No, Victoria said quietly. I'm not married. Do you have kids? The question hung in the air like a grenade with its pin pulled. Victoria's face went completely still, and Marcus saw something dangerous flash behind her eyes. I had a daughter, Victoria said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. She died 3 years ago. The office fell silent except for the soft sound of Zoe's crayons moving across paper. Marcus felt his heart break for this woman who'd just revealed her deepest wound to a 9-year-old stranger. I'm sorry, Zoe said, her voice gentle. My mommy died too. Daddy says she's in heaven now, watching over us. Maybe your little girl is watching over you too. Victoria's perfectly composed mask cracked. She turned away, staring out at the ocean, her shoulders rigid with the effort of maintaining control. Mr. Chen, she said finally, her voice businesslike once again. The position includes a cottage on the property. 2 bedrooms, fully furnished. Your daughter would need to be enrolled in the local school district. Marcus's heart leaped. Was she offering him the job? The school district is excellent. I researched it. You'd start Monday. 6 a.m. sharp. There's a staff meeting at 8. Victoria turned back to face him, her mask firmly in place. I expect you to be punctual, professional, and invisible unless needed. Can you handle that? Yes, ma'am. Good. She stood up, extending her hand for a handshake. Welcome to Sterling Estate, Mr. Chen. As they shook hands, Marcus felt the tremor in her fingers. Just for a moment, just enough to remind him that beneath the Ice Queen exterior was a woman who'd lost everything that mattered. Thank you, he said. You won't regret this. I rarely regret anything, Victoria replied. But as she watched Zoe carefully pack her crayons, she wondered if she'd just made the first impulsive decision of her adult life. As they prepared to leave, Zoe approached Victoria's desk and placed something on it, a drawing from her coloring book. It showed a house with a rainbow arcing over it, and 3 stick figures standing in front. A man, a woman, and a little girl, all holding hands. That's for you, Zoe said simply. For your office. So it won't be so quiet. Victoria stared at the drawing, something tight and painful expanding in her chest. Thank you, she managed. After they left, Victoria sat alone in her office, staring at the child's drawing. For the first time in 3 years, the silence felt different, not peaceful but expectant. Like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to change. She picked up the drawing and, after a moment's hesitation, placed it in the top drawer of her desk. Out of sight, but not thrown away. Outside, as Marcus loaded Zoe back into their car, his hands were shaking with relief and terror. He'd gotten the job. The impossible, life-changing job. But as he looked back at the massive mansion, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just agreed to something far more complicated than estate management. Daddy, Zoe asked as they drove away, is the sad lady going to be okay? Marcus glanced at his daughter in the rearview mirror. What makes you think she's sad? Her house is too quiet, Zoe said wisely. And she has the same eyes you had after Mommy died. Before you learned to smile again. As they descended the winding road from Sterling Estate, Marcus wondered if his 9-year-old daughter had just diagnosed what 6 months of failed interviews had missed. Victoria Sterling wasn't heartless, she was heartbroken. And somehow, impossibly, they'd just become part of her story. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made Malibu postcards famous. Marcus stood outside the gates of Sterling Estate at 5:55 a.m., his hands gripping the steering wheel of his Honda Civic as if it might anchor him to his old life. Through the wrought iron bars, he could see the mansion rising like a monument to wealth he'd never imagined. Daddy, your heart is beating really fast, Zoe observed from the back seat, where she sat surrounded by 2 suitcases and a garbage bag filled with her stuffed animals. Are you scared? A little, Marcus admitted, pressing the intercom button. The gate swung open with mechanical precision, and he drove through feeling like he was crossing into another world entirely. The cottage Victoria had mentioned sat tucked among eucalyptus trees on the east side of the property. It was small by Sterling estate standards, probably 800 square feet, but it was larger than their East LA apartment and infinitely more beautiful. White stucco walls, red tile roof, and a front porch that overlooked a grove of lemon trees. "It's like a fairy tale house," Zoe whispered, pressing her face against the window. Marcus parked and helped her out, both of them standing in the morning quiet. The air smelled of jasmine and ocean salt, so different from the exhaust and concrete of their old neighborhood. For a moment, he allowed himself to imagine that this was real, that they belonged here. "Mr. Chun." Victoria's voice cut through his reverie like a blade. She stood 20 feet away, dressed in a charcoal business suit that probably cost more than Marcus's car. Her blonde hair was pulled back in that same severe style, and her blue eyes held all the warmth of a winter morning. "Miss Sterling," Marcus straightened. "We're ready to get started." "Good. Zoe, there's a school bus that stops at the main gate at 7:30 a.m. You'll need to be ready." Victoria's gaze shifted to the child, and Marcus caught something, a flicker of something that might have been pain before her expression went neutral again. "I packed my backpack," Zoe said proudly, hefting a bright pink bag that was almost as big as she was. "And I brought my lucky pencil. It's yellow like the butterflies Mommy used to like." The effect on Victoria was immediate and devastating. Her face went absolutely white, and she took a step backward as if she'd been slapped. "Butterflies," she repeated, her voice barely audible. "Yeah. Mommy said yellow butterflies were messages from heaven. Do you like butterflies?" Victoria's hands were trembling now, and Marcus saw her fighting for control. Charlotte loved butterflies. She had a butterfly garden in the back of the house." The words came out broken, like pieces of glass. Marcus had never heard Victoria Sterling speak her daughter's name before. He'd only read about the accident in old newspaper articles he'd found online. 3-year-old Charlotte Sterling, drowned in the family pool while her mother was on a business call. "Can I see it?" Zoe asked, her voice gentle in the way children's voices became when they sensed adult pain. "No." The word came out sharp, desperate. "No, it's not maintained anymore. Nothing grows there now." Marcus stepped forward, instinctively wanting to comfort this woman who looked like she was about to shatter. "Miss Sterling, maybe we should." "The staff meeting is in the main house," Victoria interrupted, her voice artificially controlled. "Conference room. 8 o'clock sharp." She turned and walked away, her heels clicking against the stone path with military precision. But Marcus saw the way her shoulders were set, the careful control of her breathing. She was running from something, and it had everything to do with his daughter's innocent question about butterflies. At 7:30 a.m., Marcus walked Zoe to the main gate, where a yellow school bus waited. The driver, a cheerful woman named Mrs. Patterson, welcomed Zoe with the kind of warmth that made Marcus's chest tight with gratitude. "You be good, Mija," he said, kneeling to adjust her backpack straps. "I'll be here when you get home. Promise?" The old fear crept into her voice, the one that had lived there since Isabella's death. "Promise. Cross my heart and hope to fly." It was their special phrase, one Isabella had made up during her last weeks when promises had become precious commodities. Zoe giggled and climbed onto the bus, waving from the window as it pulled away. Marcus stood watching until it disappeared around the bend, then turned to face his new life. The main house was even more intimidating in daylight. Marcus entered through the service entrance, following Victoria's directions to the conference room. The staff was already assembled, a collection of people who looked like they'd been hired from a catalog titled, "How to Serve the Wealthy." There was Helena, the head housekeeper, a stern woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. James, the head groundskeeper, looked like he'd been carved from one of the oak trees he tended. Maria, the cook, was the only one who smiled when Marcus entered, her warm face reminding him of his abuela back in Texas. Everyone, this is Marcus Chun, our new estate manager, Victoria announced from the head of the table. She'd regained her composure completely, every trace of her earlier vulnerability erased. He'll be overseeing operations and reporting directly to me. The meeting was a masterclass in intimidation. Victoria ran through expectations with the precision of a military commander. Every surface was to be spotless, every meal served at the exact temperature, every garden bed maintained to her exacting standards. Staff were to be invisible unless summoned, professional at all times, and completely devoted to the smooth operation of her isolated world. Questions? Victoria asked, her gaze sweeping the room. Marcus raised his hand. About the butterfly garden you mentioned earlier. What about it? Victoria's voice could have frozen lava. I noticed it's in the back of the property, but it's not on any of the maintenance schedules. Should I add it to the groundskeeping rotation? The room went silent. Marcus saw James and Helena exchange glances, and Maria actually winced. No, Victoria said, her voice deadly quiet. That area is off limits. To everyone. Are we clear? Yes, ma'am. Good. James, you'll spend the morning showing Mr. Chin the grounds. Helena, the usual schedule. Maria, I'll be working through lunch again. As the meeting broke up, Maria approached Marcus with a sympathetic expression. Mijo, she said quietly, some places in this house are full of ghosts. The butterfly garden is one of them. Best to leave it alone. The morning tour with James revealed the scope of Marcus's new responsibilities. 15 acres of manicured perfection, from the infinity pool that overlooked the ocean to the tennis court that hadn't been used in years. The greenhouse, fully automated and growing exotic orchids that no one ever saw. The guest house, pristine and empty, waiting for visitors who never came. She's not a bad person, James said as they walked through the rose garden. Just broken. The little girl's death, it changed everything. Before that, this place was alive. Parties, laughter, joy. Now it's like a mausoleum. How long have you worked here? Marcus asked. 8 years. I watched Charlotte grow from a baby to a toddler. She used to follow me around the garden, trying to help plant flowers. Had dirt under her fingernails and flowers in her hair, always laughing. James's voice grew soft. After the accident, Miss Sterling fired half the staff. Said she couldn't stand to see familiar faces. I stayed because someone had to keep the place running. They stopped at the edge of the property, where a high stone wall separated the maintained gardens from what looked like a wilderness. Through the gaps in the wall, Marcus could see overgrown plants, tangled vines, and the remnants of what had once been carefully tended beds. That's it, James said quietly. The butterfly garden. 3 years of neglect. She won't let anyone touch it, won't even look at it. But sometimes late at night, I see her walking the perimeter just staring at the wall. At 3:15 p.m., Marcus was repairing a sprinkler head near the main house when he heard the school bus arrive. He watched Zoe climb down the steps, her yellow dress bright against the muted colors of the estate, and felt his heart lift for the first time all day. Daddy! She ran to him, backpack bouncing. School was amazing. My teacher is Mrs. Anderson, and she has a fish tank with real fish, and I made a friend named Ashley, and she has a horse, and maybe someday I can meet the horse and... Slow down, Mija, Marcus laughed, catching her in a hug. One thing at a time. Can we explore? Please? I want to see everything. Marcus glanced toward the main house, where Victoria's office windows reflected the afternoon sun. We can explore some of it, but there are places we can't go. Like the butterfly garden? Marcus's heart stopped. How do you know about that? I saw it from the bus window. It looks sad and lonely. Why doesn't the sad lady take care of it? Before Marcus could answer, he saw Victoria emerge from the main house. She wore a different outfit now, jeans and a white blouse that made her look younger, more vulnerable. She was carrying a watering can and walking toward the greenhouse. Miss Sterling, Zoe called out, waving enthusiastically. "I'm back from school." Victoria stopped, her body language stiffening. But she turned and walked toward them, her expression carefully neutral. "How was your first day?" she asked, her voice formal. "It was wonderful. I learned about photosynthesis and fractions, and I drew a picture of your house. Want to see?" Before Victoria could respond, Zoe was digging through her backpack, pulling out a sheet of construction paper covered in crayon drawings. This one showed the mansion, but unlike her previous drawing, this one included the overgrown area behind the stone wall. "That's the butterfly garden," Zoe said, pointing to a section filled with brown and black scribbles. "It looks sick, but I drew some flowers growing there anyway because I think that's what it wants to be." Victoria stared at the drawing, her face cycling through emotions too quickly to track. Pain, longing, anger, and something that might have been hope all flashed across her features. "You drew flowers," she said finally. "Yellow ones," Zoe nodded, "for the butterflies, and purple ones for the bees, and white ones because they're pretty." Victoria's hand moved toward the drawing, then stopped. "Charlotte loved yellow flowers," she whispered. "She planted marigolds everywhere, said they were sunshine flowers. Marigolds are easy to grow," Zoe said matter-of-factly. "Mrs. Anderson taught us about them in science class. They like sun and water, and they don't mind if you forget to take care of them sometimes." Something broke in Victoria's expression. "I forgot," she said, her voice cracking. "I forgot to take care of everything." Marcus saw the tears forming in her eyes, saw the way she was fighting to maintain control. This was Victoria Sterling at her most vulnerable, and he knew without being told that very few people had ever seen her this way. "It's okay," Zoe said gently. "Daddy forgot how to take care of our plants after Mommy died. But then he remembered, and now we have a lemon tree in a pot, and it's growing new leaves." Victoria looked at Marcus, and he saw something in her eyes that made his breath catch. It wasn't just pain, it was a plea for help, a desperate need for someone to understand the weight she'd been carrying alone. "Maybe," Victoria said slowly, "maybe we could plant some marigolds. Just a few. In the butterfly garden?" Zoe asked hopefully. Victoria's face went pale, but she nodded. "Yes, in the butterfly garden." Marcus felt something shift in the air around them, like the moment before a storm breaks. Whatever was happening here, it was bigger than estate management, bigger than employment, bigger than the careful boundaries they'd all been trying to maintain. "I'll help," he said quietly. Victoria looked at him, and for the first time since he'd met her, she smiled. It was small, fragile, and quickly hidden, but it was real. "Thank you," she whispered. As they stood there in the afternoon sun, a broken billionaire, a struggling father, and a 9-year-old girl who saw hope in the darkest places, Marcus realized that taking this job had been about more than survival. It had been about healing. For all of them. The moment stretched between them like a bridge being built from shared understanding and tentative hope. Victoria clutched Zoe's drawing to her chest, and Marcus saw that her hands were shaking. "I should go," Victoria said suddenly, the walls slamming back up. "I have calls to make." But as she walked away, she didn't throw the drawing away. She carried it with her, holding it like something precious and fragile. Through the window of her office, Marcus and Zoe watched her sit at her desk, staring at the child's artwork with an expression that looked like someone remembering how to breathe. "Daddy," Zoe asked, slipping her small hand into his. "Are we going to help her fix the broken places?" Marcus squeezed her hand, looking at the stone wall that separated the perfect gardens from the wilderness of grief beyond. "Yeah, Mija, I think we are." As the sun began to set over Sterling Estate, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in 18 months. Hope. Not just for financial security or a better life for Zoe, but for the possibility that 3 broken people might find a way to heal together. The butterfly garden waited behind its stone wall, overgrown and forgotten. But tomorrow, maybe they would plant marigolds. Maybe they would remember how to tend to the things that mattered most. Maybe they would learn that love, like flowers, could grow in the most unexpected places. The next morning arrived with a marine layer that shrouded Sterling Estate in gray mist, as if the whole property was holding its breath. Marcus stood at the kitchen window of the cottage, watching fog swirl around the lemon trees while Zoe ate cereal at the small wooden table behind him. "The sad lady looked different yesterday," Zoe observed, her spoon creating tiny whirlpools in her milk. Like she was remembering something happy and sad at the same time. Marcus turned from the window, studying his daughter's face. At 9 years old, Zoe possessed an emotional intelligence that sometimes startled him. She'd been watching people carefully since Isabella's death, learning to read the subtle signs of adult pain. "Sometimes grown-ups carry heavy feelings," he said, sitting across from her. "It takes time to learn how to put them down. Like how you used to cry in the shower, so I couldn't hear you." Marcus's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. "You knew about that? The walls are thin, Daddy. And you made the same sounds I made when I missed Mommy, but didn't want to make you sadder." The simple honesty of it hit him like a physical blow. All those months he'd thought he was protecting her, she'd been protecting him right back. He reached across the table and took her small hand in his. "I'm sorry, Mija. I didn't know you were taking care of me too." "It's okay. We take care of each other. That's what families do." At 7:30 a.m., Marcus walked Zoe to the school bus, the morning routine already feeling familiar. Mrs. Patterson greeted them with her usual warmth, and Zoe climbed aboard clutching another drawing, this one showing 3 stick figures standing in a garden full of yellow flowers. "For the sad lady," she explained before the bus pulled away. Marcus stood watching until the taillights disappeared, then turned to face his second day at Sterling Estate. The fog was beginning to lift, revealing the mansion's imposing facade. Through the tall windows, he could see lights in Victoria's office. She was already at work, probably had been for hours. The morning staff meeting was different from the previous day's formal introduction. Victoria sat at the head of the conference table, wearing a navy business suit that could have graced a magazine cover, her hair pulled back so severely it might have been painted on. But Marcus noticed the way she kept glancing at a spot on the table where something had been placed and then removed. "The quarterly board meeting is next week," she announced, her voice crisp and professional. "I want everything perfect. Helena, I need the guest rooms prepared even though no one is staying. James, every plan on the property needs to be showroom ready. Marcus, I want a complete maintenance report on all systems." She rattled off instructions with military precision, each task designed to keep the staff busy and away from the main house. Marcus recognized the strategy: keep everyone at a distance, maintain control through constant activity. "Questions?" Victoria asked, her gaze sweeping the room without lingering on anyone. "About the butterfly garden," Marcus began. "What about it?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Yesterday you mentioned planting marigolds. I can prepare the soil, clear out the overgrowth. I changed my mind." Victoria's voice was flat, final. "The garden stays as it is. Focus on the areas that matter to the board." Helena and James exchanged glances. Maria's face showed sympathy mixed with resignation, as if she'd seen this pattern before. "Understood," Marcus said quietly. But as the meeting broke up, Victoria called out to him, "Mr. Chin." A word. The others filed out, leaving them alone in the conference room. Victoria stood at the window, her back to him, her posture rigid with tension. "My personal life is not your concern," she said without turning around. "Your job is to maintain the property, not to fix things that can't be fixed." "Of course, Miss Sterling. I overstepped." "You did." She turned then, and Marcus saw something in her eyes that contradicted her words. "Fear, maybe. Or desperation. I hired you because you're qualified and you need the job. That's the extent of our relationship. I understand. Good. Because I won't tolerate another breach of professional boundaries. Marcus nodded and left the room, but he couldn't shake the feeling that Victoria was trying to convince herself as much as him. The woman who had whispered about planting marigolds was at war with the billionaire who couldn't afford to show weakness. The morning flew by in a blur of maintenance tasks. Marcus checked every system in the main house, from the climate control to the security cameras, making notes on his clipboard, while trying to ignore the way Victoria's presence seemed to charge the air around her. She was everywhere and nowhere, passing through rooms like a ghost, her heels clicking on marble floors, her phone permanently pressed to her ear. He caught fragments of conversations about market volatility, hostile takeovers, and profit margins. Each call seemed to make her more brittle, more removed from the woman who had smiled at his daughter's drawing. At lunch, Marcus ate alone in the cottage while reviewing property blueprints. The butterfly garden was marked on the original plans from 15 years ago, a 2-acre space designed with walking paths, water features, and native plants chosen specifically to attract monarch butterflies. According to the notes, it had been Charlotte's favorite place on the property. Now it was a wilderness, visible only as a tangle of green behind the stone wall. Marcus found himself staring at it through the cottage window, wondering what it would take to bring it back to life. His phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Need you in the main house. Library. Now. Marcus found her standing in the center of the library, surrounded by towers of books and papers. She'd removed her suit jacket, revealing a silk blouse that made her look less like a corporate warrior and more like a woman drowning in her own success. The board wants a complete inventory of all artwork and collectibles, she said without preamble. For insurance purposes. It needs to be finished by Friday. Marcus looked around the library. Oil paintings covered the walls, sculptures occupied every alcove, and rare books filled floor-to-ceiling shelves. It would take a team of appraisers weeks to catalog everything properly. That's a lot of work for 4 days, he said carefully. Then you'd better get started. She turned to leave, but Marcus spoke up. Ms. Sterling? Can I ask you something? Victoria stopped, her shoulders tensing. What? Why did you really hire me? My resume was good, but not great. I had no experience with properties this size, no connections in your world. There had to be better candidates. For a long moment, she didn't answer. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because you looked at my daughter's room and saw a little girl who loved butterflies. Everyone else saw a tragic accident that made them uncomfortable. She paused, her back still to him. And because your daughter draws flowers in dead gardens and believes they can grow again. The admission hung between them like a bridge neither was ready to cross. Victoria straightened her shoulders, slipping back into her corporate armor. Get started on the inventory, she said, and walked away. Marcus spent the afternoon cataloging artwork, but his mind kept returning to Victoria's words. She'd hired him not despite his connection to loss, but because of it. They were all orbiting around the same black hole of grief, pulled together by forces none of them fully understood. At 3:15 p.m., he heard the school bus arrive and walked to the main gate to meet Zoe. She bounded off the bus with her usual enthusiasm, but Marcus noticed she was carrying something carefully in her hands. Look, Daddy. She opened her palms to reveal a small plant in a plastic cup. We planted marigold seeds in science class, and Mrs. Anderson let me bring one home. Marcus's heart clenched. That's beautiful, Mija. I want to plant it in the butterfly garden. For Charlotte. Zoe, I don't think. Please, Daddy? It's just one little flower. And it's already growing. See the tiny green leaves. Marcus looked at the seedling, then at his daughter's hopeful face. The plant was barely 2 inches tall, impossibly fragile in the small plastic cup. Just like hope itself. Let's ask Miss Sterling, he said finally. They found Victoria in her office, surrounded by computer monitors and financial reports. She looked up when they knocked, her expression automatically shifting to professional politeness. "Ms. Sterling," Zoe said, stepping forward with her plant. "I grew a marigold at school. Can I plant it in Charlotte's garden?" Victoria's face went white. "You can't, that's not. It's very small," Zoe continued, holding up the seedling. "And Mrs. Anderson said marigolds are survivor flowers. They can grow almost anywhere if you give them a chance." "No." Victoria's voice was sharp, desperate. "I told you that area is off limits. But you said we could plant marigolds yesterday. You said Charlotte loved yellow flowers. I was wrong. I shouldn't have said that." Victoria stood up, pacing behind her desk like a caged animal. "The garden is dead. Nothing grows there anymore. Nothing can grow there." "That's not true," Zoe said quietly. "I can see green plants from the school bus. They're all tangled up, but they're alive. They're weeds." Victoria's voice cracked. "Ugly, worthless weeds choking out everything beautiful. Just like—" She stopped, her hand flying to her mouth as if she could catch the words before they escaped. Marcus understood. The garden wasn't just overgrown. It was a mirror of Victoria's internal landscape. Every tangled vine, every dead flower bed, every broken pathway reflected her own emotional devastation. "Miss Sterling," he said gently, "maybe we could just plant the marigold in a pot, on the patio outside the library. Charlotte could still see it from wherever she is." Victoria's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Don't you dare use my daughter to manipulate me. I'm not trying to manipulate you. I'm trying to help you heal." "I don't want to heal." The words exploded from her like a dam bursting. "I want to hurt. I want to remember every second of pain, because it's all I have left of her. If I let go of the grief, I let go of Charlotte, and I won't do that. I won't." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria stood behind her desk, trembling with the force of her admission, while Zoe clutched her small plant and looked between the two adults with wide, understanding eyes. "You won't lose her," Zoe said finally, her voice gentle but certain. "When Mommy died, I thought if I stopped being sad, I'd forget her. But that's not how it works. Love doesn't disappear when you stop hurting. It just changes shape." Victoria sank into her chair, her carefully constructed walls crumbling. "I don't know how to change. I don't know how to be anything other than broken." "You don't have to change all at once," Marcus said. "Maybe you just start with one small thing. One little flower." Victoria looked at the marigold seedling in Zoe's hands, then at the child's earnest face. For a moment, Marcus thought she might say yes. He saw her reaching for hope the way a drowning person reaches for a life preserver. Then her phone rang. The sound shattered the moment like glass. Victoria glanced at the caller ID, and her expression went cold, professional. "I have to take this," she said, already reaching for the phone. "It's Tokyo." "Ms. Sterling," Marcus started. "The conversation is over. Please see yourselves out." She answered the phone, switching immediately to the clipped, authoritative tone she used for business. "Sterling here. What's the situation with the Yamamoto acquisition?" Marcus took Zoe's hand and led her from the office, but not before he saw Victoria watching them leave in the reflection of her computer screen. Her face held the expression of someone who had just chosen safety over possibility, isolation over connection. Outside the main house, Zoe looked up at him with tears in her eyes. "She's so scared, Daddy. I know Mija. She thinks if she loves us, something bad will happen." Marcus knelt down to his daughter's level, amazed once again by her wisdom. "How do you know that?" "Because that's how I felt when you started smiling again. I thought if I let myself be happy, God would take you away too." They walked back to the cottage in silence, Zoe still carefully carrying her marigold seedling. As they reached the front porch, she turned to Marcus with determination in her young face. "I'm going to plant it anyway," she announced. "In a pot, like you said. And I'm going to put it where she can see it from her office window." Zoe. She needs to remember that beautiful things can grow, even in sad places. Even when we're scared. That evening, after Zoe had gone to bed, Marcus sat on the cottage porch with a beer and watched the lights in Victoria's office. She was still working, still hiding behind spreadsheets and conference calls, still choosing the known pain of isolation over the uncertain possibility of healing. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "The marigold is in a pot on the library patio. Make sure it gets watered." Marcus smiled, looking toward the main house where a single light glowed in the library window. Victoria Sterling, the Ice Queen billionaire, was taking care of a 9-year-old's flower. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. Maybe tomorrow they would take another small step toward healing. Maybe they would learn that love wasn't about forgetting pain, but about choosing hope despite it. The butterfly garden waited behind its stone wall, overgrown but not dead. And somewhere in the darkness, Marcus could swear he heard the whisper of possibility on the night wind. The marigold sat in its small pot on the library patio, barely visible in the darkness, but somehow managing to catch the light spilling from Victoria's office window. It was just a seedling, fragile and small, but it was growing, just like hope itself. The emergency call came at 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in late October, jolting Marcus awake with the harsh buzz of his phone. He fumbled for it in the darkness, his heart already racing with the parent's instinct that middle-of-the-night calls meant trouble. "Mr. Chin? This is Captain Rodriguez with the Malibu Fire Department. We need to evacuate your building immediately. A water main burst on Pacific Coast Highway, and the flooding has compromised the electrical systems in several apartment complexes, including yours." Marcus was already reaching for his clothes, his mind spinning through the logistics. "How long do we have?" "You need to be out in 15 minutes. The whole block is being evacuated until we can assess the damage and safety concerns." He hung up and gently shook Zoe awake. She blinked up at him in confusion, her hair messy from sleep. "What's wrong, Daddy?" "There's flooding from a broken pipe, Mija. We need to pack some clothes and find somewhere to stay for a few days." Zoe sat up, instantly alert. "Are we in danger?" "No, we're safe. But we can't stay here tonight." They moved quickly through their small apartment, stuffing clothes into duffel bags and grabbing essential items. Marcus's mind raced through options. Hotels were expensive, and his sister in San Diego was dealing with her own family crisis. The homeless shelter would take them, but the thought of Zoe sleeping on a cot surrounded by strangers made his stomach clench. Outside, the street was chaos. Red and blue lights flashed from emergency vehicles, and residents stood in small groups clutching suitcases and pets. Water rushed along the gutters, carrying debris from the burst main. The smell of wet concrete and electrical burns filled the air. "Where will we go?" Zoe asked, pressing close to his side as they watched their neighbors' confused faces. Before Marcus could answer, his phone rang. Victoria's name appeared on the screen, and he stared at it in surprise. It was nearly 3:30 a.m. "Ms. Sterling, I heard about the flooding on the news." Her voice was different, softer, without its usual professional edge. "Are you and Zoe safe?" "We're fine. Just displaced for a few days while they fix the electrical issues." "Come to the estate. The guest cottage has 2 bedrooms, and it's already furnished." Marcus hesitated. "I appreciate the offer, but I don't want to impose." "You're not imposing. You're my employee, and this is an emergency. Besides, it's practical. You'll be on site for the board meeting preparations." There was something in her tone that suggested this offer meant more to her than mere practicality, but Marcus was too tired and worried to analyze it. "Thank you," he said. "We'll be there in an hour." The drive to Sterling Estate was surreal in the pre-dawn darkness. Zoe dozed against his shoulder while Marcus navigated the empty streets, their life condensed into 2 duffel bags and a small backpack. The flooding had affected a larger area than he'd realized. Several blocks were cordoned off, and emergency crews worked under portable floodlights. The estate's security gate stood open, and Marcus could see lights on in the main house. Victoria met them at the guest cottage, wearing jeans and a UCLA sweatshirt that made her look younger, more approachable. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she'd traded her designer heels for worn sneakers. "I had Helena prepare the bedrooms," she said, leading them inside. "There's food in the kitchen, and the Wi-Fi password is on the counter." The guest cottage was larger than their apartment, with a full kitchen, living room, and 2 bedrooms decorated in warm earth tones. French doors opened onto a small patio with a view of the gardens. It was beautiful, comfortable, and completely overwhelming. "This is too much," Marcus said, setting down their bags. "It's temporary," Victoria replied, but her tone was gentle. "And it's practical. I need you focused on work, not worried about where you're sleeping." Zoe wandered through the cottage with wide eyes, touching the soft cushions and examining the artwork. "It's like a fairy tale house," she whispered. "The bigger bedroom is yours," Victoria told Marcus. "Zoe can have the one with the window seat." "I thought she might like it." "You thought about what I would like?" Zoe asked, looking up at Victoria with surprise. Victoria's composure flickered. The window looks out over the garden. There are hummingbirds in the morning." "Can I see?" Victoria led Zoe to the smaller bedroom, where a cushioned window seat overlooked the grounds. Even in the darkness, they could see the shapes of trees and flower beds, the distant outline of the abandoned butterfly garden. "It's perfect," Zoe breathed, climbing onto the window seat. "Thank you, Victoria. Can I call you Victoria?" Yes. "That's fine." Marcus watched the exchange with growing amazement. Victoria Sterling, the woman who fired employees for minor infractions, was tucking his daughter into bed at 4 a.m. She even found an extra blanket when Zoe mentioned being cold. "Sleep well," Victoria said softly, and for a moment, Marcus saw her as she might have been with Charlotte, gentle, nurturing, full of love. After Zoe was asleep, Marcus found Victoria in the cottage kitchen, making coffee with shaking hands. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving them both exhausted and emotionally raw. "You didn't have to do this," he said. "I know." She handed him a mug, their fingers brushing in the transfer. "But I wanted to." "Is that strange?" "Not strange. Kind." They sat at the small kitchen table, the silence comfortable rather than awkward. Through the window, they could see the first hint of dawn touching the horizon. "I called my insurance company," Marcus said. "They'll cover temporary housing, but not much. I was dreading taking Zoe to a motel. She's been through enough disruption." Victoria's voice was quiet. Losing her mother, changing schools, now this. She needs stability. "You understand that." "I understand what it's like to have your world turned upside down. To feel like you're constantly one crisis away from losing everything that matters." Marcus studied her face in the dim light. "Is that how you feel? Like you're about to lose everything?" "Every day." The admission seemed to surprise her. "The business, the house, the carefully constructed life I've built. It all feels so fragile. One wrong decision, one moment of weakness, and it could all disappear. But you've built something amazing. The company, this property, your success. None of it matters if you're alone." Victoria wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, seeking warmth. "I've spent 3 years building walls to keep pain out, but I've kept everything else out too. Joy, connection, love. I've made myself so safe that I've forgotten how to live." The vulnerability in her voice made Marcus's chest tight. "It's not too late to change that, isn't it? I've hurt so many people, made so many enemies. I've turned myself into someone I'm not sure I even like. You took us in tonight. You worried about Zoe's comfort. You've been watering a 9-year-old's marigold for 3 weeks. That's not the action of someone who's lost their capacity for love." Victoria looked up at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "I see her in Zoe sometimes. The way she tilts her head when she's thinking, the way she draws flowers with faces. It should hurt, but it doesn't. It makes me remember what it felt like to have a daughter who saw magic in ordinary things. Zoe sees magic in you too. She shouldn't. I'm not safe for children to love. Why? Because you're human? Because you've made mistakes? Because you're still learning how to heal. Victoria stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Because everyone I love leaves. My parents, my husband, Charlotte. I'm cursed, Marcus. I destroy the things I care about most. That's not true. It is. Charlotte died because I was working late. I was supposed to pick her up from school, but I had a board meeting. My driver got her instead, and on the way home, they were hit by a drunk driver. If I had been there, if I had put her first, she would have died anyway. Marcus's voice was firm, certain. The drunk driver would have hit your car too. You would have both died, or you would have survived and carried even more guilt. You can't control everything, Victoria. You can't protect people from life. I couldn't protect her, and I couldn't protect Isabella from cancer. But that doesn't mean we stop loving. It means we love harder, deeper, because we know how precious and fragile it is. Victoria turned from the window, her face streaked with tears. I'm terrified of caring about you and Zoe. I'm terrified of what will happen if I let myself love you. The words hung between them like a bridge, an admission of feelings neither had dared to voice. Marcus stood slowly, crossing the small kitchen to stand in front of her. I'm terrified too, he said, but I'm more terrified of missing this chance, of spending the rest of my life wondering what could have been if I'd been brave enough to try. What if we hurt each other? Then we'll heal. What if we don't work out? Then we'll learn something about ourselves. What if we're happy? Then we'll deserve it. Victoria reached up to touch his face, her fingers gentle against his cheek. I don't know how to be in a relationship anymore. I don't know how to be part of a family. Neither do I. But maybe we can figure it out together. The kiss was inevitable, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as 3 weeks of unspoken attraction and emotional connection finally found expression. Victoria tasted like coffee and possibility, and Marcus felt something inside him uncurl for the first time since Isabella's death. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. This is crazy, Victoria whispered. The best things usually are. I have a board meeting in 4 hours. I should get some sleep. So should I. But neither of them moved. They stood in the pre-dawn quiet, foreheads touching, sharing the same air and the same fragile hope. Marcus? Yes. Thank you. For staying. For not giving up on me when I was trying so hard to push you away. Thank you for letting us stay. For taking care of Zoe. For being brave enough to let us in. A sound from the bedroom made them step apart, Zoe calling out in her sleep, a word that made Victoria's breath catch. Mama? It was soft, questioning, the sound of a child reaching for comfort in her dreams. Victoria's eyes filled with fresh tears. She's dreaming, Marcus said gently. She called me Mama. She wants a mother. She's been looking for one since Isabella died. I can't be that for her. I can't replace her real mother. No one's asking you to replace anyone, but you could be something new, something just for her. Victoria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I don't know how to be a mother to a living child anymore. You don't have to know. You just have to love her. The rest will come. From the bedroom, Zoe called out again, and this time both adults heard it clearly. Victoria? Where are you? Victoria looked at Marcus with panic in her eyes. She's looking for me. Go to her. What if I do it wrong? Then you'll do it wrong, and tomorrow you'll do it better. That's what parenting is, a series of beautiful mistakes that somehow add up to love. Victoria took a shaky breath and walked to Zoe's bedroom. Marcus followed, standing in the doorway as she approached the bed. I'm here, Victoria said softly, sitting on the edge of the mattress. You were having a bad dream. Zoe's eyes fluttered open, confused and still half asleep. Victoria? I dreamed there was a fire and we had to run away. There was no fire, sweetheart. Just some flooding at your apartment. You're safe here. Will you stay until I fall asleep again? Victoria glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. Of course. Zoe scooted over, making room on the bed. Victoria lay down stiffly, unsure of how to hold herself. Zoe solved the problem by curling up against her side, her small body trusting and warm. You smell like flowers, Zoe murmured. Like the garden before it got sad. Go to sleep, little one. Victoria? Yes. I'm glad we're having a sleepover. It feels like we're a family. Victoria's arms tightened around the child, and she looked up to find Marcus watching from the doorway. His expression was soft, full of love and hope and the terrifying possibility of happiness. Yes, Victoria whispered, pressing a kiss to Zoe's forehead. It does feel like family. Within minutes, Zoe was asleep again, her breathing deep and even. Victoria remained still, afraid to move and break the spell of this moment, holding someone else's child, feeling needed and protective and overwhelmed with tenderness. Marcus approached the bed quietly. How does it feel? Like coming home, Victoria admitted. Like remembering who I used to be before I forgot how to love. You never forgot. You just buried it under all that pain. I don't want to bury it anymore. I want to feel everything, even if it hurts. Even if it's scary? Especially if it's scary. The scariest things are usually the most worth doing. Marcus reached out to stroke Victoria's hair, his touch gentle and reassuring. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next. What if the board meeting? We'll go fine. You're brilliant, Victoria. You don't need to be perfect to be worthy of love. She smiled at him, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her since they'd met. I love you too, Marcus. I've been trying not to, but I can't help it. Good. Don't help it. Let it happen. As dawn broke over Sterling Estate, 3 people who had been living as islands found themselves connected by the invisible threads of love, hope, and the courage to try again. The butterfly garden waited behind its stone wall, overgrown but not dead, ready for the healing that would come. And in the guest cottage, a makeshift family slept peacefully, dreaming of marigolds and second chances and the beautiful possibility of tomorrow. Sometimes the most beautiful families are the ones we choose, not the ones we're born into. Victoria's fear of loving again is so real. We've all been there, haven't we? What do you think it takes to open your heart after loss? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story of found family is touching your soul, smash that like button and share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. The morning sun streamed through the cottage windows, painting everything in gold, and for the first time in 3 years, Victoria Sterling woke up feeling like she might actually deserve happiness. The morning after the sleepover arrived with the kind of California sunshine that made everything seem possible. Victoria woke to the sound of laughter drifting through her bedroom windows, real, uninhibited joy that she hadn't heard on her property in 3 years. She pulled on her robe and walked to the window, where she could see Marcus and Zoe in the garden below, chasing bubbles that caught the morning light like tiny prisms. Zoe wore a bright yellow sundress that made her look like a small sunflower, her dark hair flying behind her as she ran. Marcus had traded his usual work clothes for jeans and a blue t-shirt that brought out his eyes, and he was laughing as he blew more bubbles from a small wand he must have found in the cottage's supply closet. "Daddy, look! I can catch them without popping them," Zoe called out, cupping her hands around a large bubble and examining it with scientific intensity. "You're getting good at that, Mija. What's your secret?" "I tell them I'm their friend before I touch them. They trust me then." Victoria's breath caught. Even Bubbles trusted this child. How had she forgotten what it felt like to see the world through a child's eyes, where everything was possible and magic was just another word for love? She dressed quickly and went downstairs to join them, but stopped short when she saw them through the kitchen window. Marcus was teaching Zoe to tend the herb garden, showing her how to pinch basil leaves to release their scent. The sight of them working together, their heads bent over the small plants, made her chest tight with longing. "The secret is to be gentle," Marcus was saying. "Plants respond to kindness, just like people." "Is that why Victoria's flowers are so sad? Because people haven't been kind to them?" Marcus glanced toward the abandoned butterfly garden, its stone walls barely visible through the overgrown hedges. "I think sometimes gardens get sad when the people who love them aren't there anymore. Like when Mama died and I stopped singing? Exactly like that." Zoe considered this, her small face serious. "But you helped me remember how to sing again. Maybe we could help Victoria's garden remember how to be happy." "Maybe we could." Victoria stepped outside, and both heads turned toward her. Marcus's smile was warm, intimate, holding all the promise of their kiss from the night before. Zoe's face lit up with pure delight. "Victoria, Daddy's teaching me about herbs. Did you know that if you crush rosemary between your fingers, it smells like Christmas and ocean at the same time?" "I did know that," Victoria said, settling onto the stone bench beside the herb garden. "I used to cook with rosemary when—" She trailed off, the half-finished sentence hanging in the air. "When what?" Zoe asked, her curiosity innocent and persistent. Victoria looked at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. "When I had someone to cook for. Before I lived alone." "Who did you cook for?" "My daughter. Her name was Charlotte." Zoe's eyes widened. "You have a daughter? Where is she?" The question was so direct, so purely childlike, that Victoria felt her careful walls crumble. She'd spent 3 years deflecting these conversations, changing the subject, building elaborate defenses around her grief. But Zoe's open face and genuine interest made pretense impossible. "She died 3 years ago," Victoria said quietly. "She was about your age." "Oh." Zoe processed this information with the particular gravity children bring to discussions of death. "That's very sad. Do you miss her?" "Every day." "What was she like?" Victoria's throat tightened. No one had asked her that question in so long. People offered sympathy, condolences, careful changes of subject. But no one had simply asked what Charlotte was like as a person. She was curious, like you. She asked a million questions about everything. Why the sky was blue, how birds knew where to fly, whether fish had dreams. She loved to draw pictures of flowers with faces, and she named all the butterflies in the garden. What were their names? Princess Sparklewings, Sir Flutterby, Madame Goldenspots. Victoria found herself smiling at the memory. She made up stories about their adventures and insisted I write them down, so she could read them to her stuffed animals. Zoe giggled. "Those are good names. She sounds like she was fun." She was. She was sunshine and music and magic all rolled into one perfect little person. Marcus watched Victoria's face transform as she spoke about Charlotte. The rigid mask she wore fell away, revealing the mother she'd been, warm, playful, completely devoted to her child. "What happened to her?" Zoe asked gently. Victoria's smile faded. "There was a car accident. A man who had been drinking hit the car she was riding in." "Were you in the car too?" "No. I was at work. I was supposed to pick her up from school, but I had an important meeting. So I sent my driver instead." Victoria's voice grew thin, strained. "If I had been there, if I had put her first, then you would have died too," Zoe said matter-of-factly. "And that would have been even sadder." The simple logic of it, delivered with such certainty, made Victoria blink in surprise. "You think so?" "I think Charlotte wouldn't want you to be sad forever. When Mama died, she came to me in a dream and said she wanted me to be happy and make lots of friends and sing all the songs we used to sing together. She said being sad was okay, but being sad forever meant I wasn't living, and she wanted me to live really, really big." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Your mama was very wise. So was Charlotte, I bet. Can you show me her room? I want to see the pictures she drew." Victoria's breath caught. I don't think. Please? I promise I'll be careful. I won't touch anything if you don't want me to. Victoria looked at Marcus, panic in her eyes. He could see her internal struggle, the desire to share Charlotte's memory warring with her fear of the pain it might bring. You don't have to, Marcus said softly. Not if you're not ready. I haven't been in there since the funeral, Victoria admitted. I keep it locked. I pay Helena to dust it once a month, but I haven't. I can't. Maybe it's time, Zoe said with the wisdom of children who have faced loss. Maybe Charlotte's room is like your garden, sad because no one visits it anymore. Victoria stared at this 9-year-old, who seemed to understand things that adults couldn't grasp. You really think she'd want me to go in there? I think she'd want you to remember the happy things instead of just the sad ones. That's what Mama would want. Victoria stood slowly, her hands shaking. Would you both come with me? I don't think I can do it alone. Of course, Marcus said, taking her hand. We'll go together. The walk to the main house felt like a journey through time. Victoria led them up the grand staircase, past formal portraits and priceless artwork, to a hallway that felt different from the rest of the house. The walls here were painted in soft pastels, and the carpet was plush and cheerful. Victoria stopped in front of a door painted with delicate flowers and butterflies. A small nameplate read Charlotte's room in cheerful purple letters. I had this made for her 5th birthday, Victoria said, her voice barely above a whisper. She chose all the colors herself. Her hand trembled as she reached for the doorknob. Marcus covered her hand with his, offering strength and support. Together, he said. The door opened to reveal a room that took Victoria's breath away. Sunlight streamed through windows dressed in butterfly print curtains, illuminating a space that was pure joy made manifest. The walls were covered with Charlotte's artwork, crayon drawings of flowers with smiling faces, watercolor butterflies, finger-painted rainbows that had been carefully framed and hung with museum-quality precision. A child-sized easel stood in one corner, still holding a half-finished painting of the garden. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with storybooks and fairy tales. A dollhouse sat in the center of the room, complete with tiny furniture and a family of small dolls. But it was the bed that made Victoria's knees weak. Charlotte's favorite stuffed animal, a purple dragon named Sparkles, still sat propped against the pillows, as if waiting for its owner to return. Oh, Zoe breathed, her eyes wide with wonder. It's beautiful. It's like a princess room, but better because it's real. Victoria sank into the small chair beside Charlotte's desk, overwhelmed by the flood of memories. She loved this room. She said it was her castle, and she was the queen of all the butterflies. Zoe approached the artwork with reverence, studying each piece carefully. She was really good at drawing. Look, this flower has eyelashes, and this butterfly has a crown. She wanted to be an artist when she grew up, Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. She said she was going to draw pictures that made people happy. She did make people happy, Marcus said gently. Look at your face right now. You're smiling. Victoria touched her cheek, surprised to find that he was right. Despite the tears, despite the pain, she was smiling at the memory of Charlotte's artistic ambitions. She would have loved you, Zoe, Victoria said. She always wanted a little sister. She used to ask me when we were going to get one, and I'd tell her someday when the time is right. Maybe the time is right now, Zoe said, sitting cross-legged on the floor beside Charlotte's dollhouse. Maybe she sent me to you because she knew you needed a little girl to love. The words hit Victoria like a physical blow. She doubled over, sobbing with a grief that had been locked away for 3 years. Marcus was beside her instantly, pulling her into his arms, holding her while she wept for all the lost tomorrows, all the pictures Charlotte would never draw, all the butterfly names she'd never invent. I'm sorry, Victoria gasped between sobs. I'm so sorry, Charlotte. I failed you. I should have been there. I should have protected you. Shoo, Marcus murmured, stroking her hair. It's not your fault. It was never your fault. But I chose work over her. I chose a meeting over my daughter. You made one choice on one day. It doesn't erase 3 years of love and devotion. It doesn't change the fact that you were an amazing mother. Zoe approached carefully, her small hand touching Victoria's knee. Can I tell you something? Victoria looked up, her face streaked with tears. When Mama was sick, she missed lots of things. She missed my school play and my birthday party and bedtime stories. But she loved me anyway. And I loved her anyway. Love isn't about being perfect or never making mistakes. Love is about trying your best and forgiving yourself when you mess up. How did you get so wise? Victoria asked, pulling Zoe into their embrace. Mama taught me, and now I'm teaching you. They sat there on Charlotte's bedroom floor, 3 broken people finding healing in each other's arms. The afternoon sun painted rainbow patterns on the walls through the butterfly curtains, and for the first time in 3 years, Charlotte's room felt alive again. I want to tell you about her, Victoria said eventually. All of it, the good and the bad and the beautiful and the heartbreaking. I want you to know who she was. We want to know, Marcus said. We want to hear every story. So Victoria talked. She told them about Charlotte's first steps, taken in pursuit of a butterfly in the garden. She described the elaborate tea parties where stuffed animals were served imaginary cookies on real china. She shared the bedtime ritual of 3 stories, 2 songs, and 1 secret whispered into Charlotte's ear. What was the secret? Zoe asked. That she was my sunshine, my star, my greatest treasure. That nothing in the world could ever change how much I loved her. That's a beautiful secret. Do you think you might have secrets for me too? Victoria's heart clenched with the possibility of it. Would you like that? Yes, please. I've never had anyone tell me secrets before. Then come here, Victoria said, pulling Zoe close. She leaned down to whisper in the child's ear, her voice soft but clear enough for Marcus to hear. You are brave and kind and full of light. You make flowers happy and adults remember how to smile. You are exactly what my heart needed, even when I didn't know it was looking for you. Zoe's face lit up with joy. That's the best secret ever. There are more where that came from, Victoria promised. As the afternoon wore on, they explored Charlotte's room together. Victoria showed them the dollhouse furniture Charlotte had arranged and rearranged 100 times. She read from Charlotte's favorite books, her voice growing stronger with each familiar story. She even played some of Charlotte's music, songs about princesses and dragons and magical gardens where anything was possible. She had good taste in music, Marcus observed as a particularly cheerful tune about dancing flowers filled the room. She said music was how feelings learned to fly, Victoria replied. I didn't understand what she meant at the time, but now I think she was talking about how songs can carry your heart places your body can't go. Like how listening to Mama's favorite song makes me feel close to her even though she's in heaven. Zoe asked. Exactly like that. As the sun began to set, painting the room in shades of gold and pink, Victoria made a decision that surprised even herself. I want to fix the butterfly garden, she said suddenly. I want to make it beautiful again. Really? Marcus asked. Are you sure? I'm sure. Charlotte loved that garden more than anything. She would be heartbroken to see it abandoned and overgrown. It's time to bring it back to life. Can we help? Zoe asked eagerly. I'm good at planting things. Daddy taught me. I would love your help, Victoria said. In fact, I can't imagine doing it without you. They spent the rest of the evening making plans. Victoria pulled out old photos of the garden in its prime, showing them the butterfly-attracting plants Charlotte had helped choose, the winding paths where she'd chased monarchs and swallowtails, the small pond where she'd floated paper boats and made wishes. It was her favorite place in the whole world, Victoria explained. She said it was where magic lived. Then we'll make it magical again, Marcus promised. We'll make it a place where Charlotte would be proud to visit. As they prepared to return to the cottage for the night, Victoria took one last look around Charlotte's room. It no longer felt like a shrine to grief. It felt like a celebration of love, a reminder of all the joy one small person had brought into the world. "Thank you," she said to Marcus and Zoe, "for helping me remember that love is stronger than loss." "Thank you for sharing her with us," Marcus replied, "for letting us love her memory too. And thank you for the secret," Zoe added. "I'll keep it in my heart forever." As they walked back to the cottage under a canopy of stars, Victoria felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Hope. Not just for healing, but for happiness. Not just for survival, but for life. The butterfly garden waited behind its stone walls, ready for resurrection. And in the guest cottage, a new kind of family was taking root, one built on shared grief, mutual understanding, and the courage to love again despite the risk of loss. Grief has a way of making us forget that love isn't lost when someone dies. It just changes form. Victoria's journey back to Charlotte's room shows us that sometimes the most healing thing we can do is revisit the places where love lived. Have you ever had to face a room, a memory, or a place that held both joy and pain? How did you find the courage to honor the love without drowning in the loss? Share your story in the comments. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. And if Victoria's breakthrough is giving you hope for your own healing, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss these stories of love conquering all. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of the garden's rebirth, and with it, the next chapter in their unlikely love story. But tonight they slept peacefully, dreaming of butterflies and second chances, and the beautiful truth that love never really ends. It just learns to bloom again in new soil, under new stars, in the hearts of those brave enough to tend it. The transformation began at sunrise on a crisp October morning in Malibu. Victoria stood at her bedroom window, watching Marcus and Zoe set up a makeshift breakfast picnic on the terrace overlooking the overgrown butterfly garden. A red checkered tablecloth covered the wrought iron table, and mason jars filled with wildflowers from the herb garden served as centerpieces. "Are you coming down, sleepyhead?" Zoe called up to her window, waving a wooden spoon covered in pancake batter. She wore bright orange overalls over a lime green t-shirt that made her look like a small, cheerful pumpkin. Victoria laughed, actually laughed, at the sight of flour in the child's hair. "I'll be right there." For the first time in 3 years, she didn't dress for armor. Instead of her usual black power suits, she chose soft blue jeans and a coral sweater that Charlotte had picked out for her during their last shopping trip together. The sweater had been hanging unworn in her closet, too painful to wear, too precious to give away. "You look pretty," Zoe announced when Victoria joined them on the terrace. "Like a sunset." "Thank you, sweetheart. You look like sunshine in a garden." Marcus looked up from the portable griddle he'd somehow procured, his face breaking into that smile that made Victoria's heart skip. He wore faded jeans and a green flannel shirt rolled up to his elbows, revealing strong forearms dusted with fine dark hair. "Good morning, beautiful," he said, his voice carrying an intimacy that made her blush. "Good morning." She stood on her tiptoes to kiss his cheek, tasting the hint of coffee and morning air on his skin. "Daddy makes the best pancakes in the whole world," Zoe announced, climbing onto Victoria's lap as if she belonged there. "He shapes them like animals. Look." Victoria examined the golden pancakes on her plate, a butterfly with delicate wing patterns, a flower with perfectly formed petals, and what appeared to be a small dragon breathing syrup flames. "These are incredible," Victoria said, cutting into the butterfly pancake. "How did you learn to do this?" "Elena taught me when I was about 8, Marcus said, settling beside them with his own plate. "She said food should make people smile before they even taste it." Elena sounds like a wise woman. She was. She always said that love was in the details, the way you fold someone's laundry, the extra spoonful of sugar in their coffee, the funny shapes you make with their food. "I want to learn to make dragon pancakes," Zoe declared, syrup dripping down her chin. Then I can make them for you, Victoria, when you're sad. I would love that, Victoria said, wiping the syrup away with a napkin. Though I don't think I'll be sad very often anymore. After breakfast, they began their work on the butterfly garden. Marcus had researched the plants Charlotte had loved, lantana, pentas, ixora, and butterfly bush, and had somehow managed to source mature specimens that would create an instant transformation. Charlotte would have loved this, Victoria said, kneeling beside a patch of earth where they were planting purple butterfly bush. She always said the garden was too patient, waiting for tiny seeds to grow. She wanted instant magic. Then we'll give her instant magic, Marcus said, carefully transplanting a golden lantana that was already heavy with blooms. They worked in comfortable harmony, the October sun warm on their backs. Victoria found herself stealing glances at Marcus as he worked, the way his muscles moved under his shirt, the careful attention he paid to each plant, the gentle way he guided Zoe's small hands as she helped. "This is nice," she said during a break, sitting on the stone wall that surrounded the garden. "I'd forgotten how good it feels to work with my hands, to create something beautiful." "You create beautiful things all the time," Marcus said, settling beside her. "Your company, your innovations. That's different. That's about profit and competition, and proving I'm the smartest person in the room. This is about love. All good work is about love," he said, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her knuckles. "The work you do feeds families, creates jobs, solves problems. You just forgot to see it that way." "How do you do that?" she asked, leaning against his shoulder. "Do what?" "Make everything seem simple and profound at the same time." He chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. "Elena again. She said the truth is usually simple. People just make it complicated because simple doesn't seem important enough." Elena raised a good man. "She'd like you," Marcus said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "She always said the best people were the ones who'd been broken and put themselves back together." That afternoon, they established what would become their first family tradition, garden time followed by cooking together. Victoria had never cooked with anyone before. Her marriage to Thomas had been a series of catered events and restaurant meals. But with Marcus and Zoe, the kitchen became a playground. "The secret to good sofrito," Marcus explained, showing Victoria how to dice onions, "is patience and love. You can't rush it." "I'm not good at patience," Victoria admitted, wiping tears from her eyes as the onions released their sharp scent. "You're learning," Zoe said from her perch on the counter, where she was carefully washing cilantro. "Daddy says patience is like muscles. It gets stronger when you use it." "Your daddy is very wise." "He's also very handsome," Zoe added with a giggle. "Do you think he's handsome?" Victoria met Marcus's eyes across the kitchen, seeing the laughter and love there. "Yes, I think he's very handsome." "Are you going to marry him?" "Zoe," Marcus protested, his cheeks reddening. "What? I'm just asking. When people love each other, they get married. And you love each other. I can tell by the way you look at each other all mushy-like." Victoria burst out laughing at the child's logic. "You're right, we do look at each other pretty mushy-like. So are you going to marry him?" "I think we should start with dinner and see how it goes," Victoria said diplomatically. "Okay, but I think you should know that I already picked out my dress for the wedding. It's going to be sparkly pink with a big bow." That evening, they ate their homemade meal on the terrace by candlelight. The butterfly garden, though still a work in progress, was already showing signs of life. A few brave butterflies had discovered the new plantings, and their wings caught the flickering light like tiny stained glass windows. "This is perfect," Victoria said, watching a monarch butterfly land on the rim of Zoe's juice glass. "Charlotte would say it's like eating dinner in a fairy tale." "What would she say about us?" Zoe asked, carefully holding still so as not to disturb the butterfly. "She'd say we're a family," Victoria said without hesitation. She believed in love at first sight, in happy endings, in the magic of finding your people. "Are we your people?" Zoe asked. Victoria looked at this child who had walked into her life and changed everything, at this man who had shown her that love could be simple and profound and healing all at once. "You're my people," she said firmly. "You're my family." The days that followed blurred together in a haze of happiness Victoria hadn't known was possible. They developed routines that felt as natural as breathing. Morning coffee on the terrace while Zoe fed the koi fish in the pond. Afternoons in the garden teaching Zoe about plants and butterflies. Evenings cooking together and sharing stories of their past. Marcus told them about his childhood in East LA, about Elena's sacrifices to give him opportunities, about meeting Zoe's mother at a community college dance where she wore a yellow dress that made her look like sunshine. "She would have loved you both," he said one evening as they watched Zoe chase fireflies in the garden. "Carmen always said the best families were the ones you chose, not the ones you were born into." Victoria shared stories of her own childhood, the cold mansion where she'd grown up, the parents who showed love through expensive gifts rather than presents, the loneliness that had driven her to build an empire just to prove she mattered. "I never learned how to be in a family," she admitted. "With Thomas, we were more like business partners than spouses. With Charlotte, I was always terrified I was doing it wrong." "You weren't doing it wrong," Marcus assured her. "Love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up every day and choosing to care more about someone else's happiness than your own comfort." "Is that what you're doing with me? Choosing to care?" "Every day," he said, pulling her close. "Every moment." Their physical relationship deepened naturally, without drama or complications. Soft kisses in the kitchen while dinner simmered. Hands held during evening walks. Marcus's arms around her as they watched old movies on the cottage sofa after Zoe had gone to bed. "I love the way you smell," Victoria murmured one night, her face pressed against his neck. "Like sunshine and sawdust and home." "I love the way you laugh," he replied, his fingers tracing patterns on her back. "Like you're surprised by joy every time." "I am surprised by joy. I'd forgotten it existed." "It never left," he said, tilting her chin up to meet his eyes. "It was just waiting for the right moment to come back." 2 weeks into their garden project, they achieved their first major milestone, a butterfly hatching from its chrysalis. Zoe had been monitoring the small green cocoon attached to a milkweed plant, checking on it every morning with scientific dedication. "Victoria, Daddy, come quick," she called from the garden. "Something's happening." They rushed outside to find Zoe crouched beside the milkweed, her eyes wide with wonder. The chrysalis was moving, splitting open to reveal wings of brilliant orange and black. "It's a monarch," Victoria breathed, her voice filled with reverence. "Charlotte's favorite." They watched in silence as the butterfly emerged, its wings damp and crumpled. Over the next hour, they witnessed the miracle of transformation as the wings dried and expanded, revealing the full glory of nature's artistry. "It's beautiful," Zoe whispered. "Do you think Charlotte sent it to say hello?" "I think she sent it to say she's happy," Victoria replied, tears streaming down her face. "She's happy that we're bringing her garden back to life." That evening, they celebrated with a feast. Marcus grilled fish on the terrace while Victoria and Zoe made a salad with herbs from their garden. They drank sparkling cider from champagne flutes and toasted their first butterfly. "To new beginnings," Victoria said, raising her glass. "To found families," Marcus added. "To butterflies and dragons and all the magic in between," Zoe concluded, making them all laugh. As October turned to November, their life together took on a rhythm that felt both new and ancient. Victoria found herself working fewer hours, delegating more to her capable team, choosing presence over productivity. She taught Zoe to use watercolors, marveling at the child's natural talent and fearless use of color. "You paint like Charlotte did," she told Zoe one afternoon as they worked side by side at the easel Victoria had set up in the garden. bold and bright and full of joy. Maybe that's because she's helping me, Zoe said matter-of-factly. Sometimes when I'm painting, I feel like someone is guiding my hand. What does it feel like? Like being hugged by sunshine. Victoria's throat tightened with emotion. That sounds exactly like Charlotte. Marcus had taken over the complete restoration of the butterfly garden, working with an intensity that came from love rather than obligation. He'd researched butterfly migration patterns, plant bloom schedules, and garden design principles with the thoroughness of a scholar. "You don't have to be perfect," Victoria told him one evening, as she found him poring over garden design books by lamplight. "I want it to be perfect," he replied. "For Charlotte. For you. For Zoe. This garden is going to be our legacy, proof that love can make beautiful things grow." "It's already perfect," she said, settling beside him on the cottage sofa. "Because it's made with love." The third week of November brought an unexpected challenge. Victoria's first business crisis since Marcus and Zoe had entered her life. A competitor had launched a hostile takeover bid, and her board was demanding her immediate and total attention. "I have to fly to New York," she told Marcus over breakfast, her phone buzzing with urgent calls. "This could take weeks to resolve." "We'll be here when you get back," he said, but she could hear the worry in his voice. "Come with me," she said suddenly. "Both of you. We'll make it an adventure. Zoe has school. She can miss a few days. We'll turn it into a learning experience. Museums, Broadway shows, carriage rides in Central Park." Marcus looked skeptical. "Your business world and our world don't exactly mix." "Then we'll create a new world where they do mix." "Please, Marcus. I can't bear the thought of being away from you both." Zoe, who had been quietly eating her cereal, looked up with excitement. "Can we really go to New York? Can we see the Statue of Liberty?" "We can see everything," Victoria promised. "If your daddy says yes." Marcus studied her face, seeing the genuine fear beneath her composed exterior. "You're really scared of leaving us." "Terrified," she admitted. "What if I go back to that world and remember how to be the person I was before? What if I lose us?" "That's not going to happen," Marcus said firmly. "We're not going anywhere. And neither are you, not the you that you've become." "How can you be so sure?" "Because love changes us," he said, taking her hand. "Not temporarily, not conditionally, but permanently. You can't unknow what you know about family, about joy, about what really matters." "So you'll come with me?" "We'll come with you," he said, looking at Zoe's eager face. "But we do this as a family. No separate hotels, no keeping us hidden from your world. If we're going to be together, we're going to be together everywhere." Victoria felt a surge of love, so intense it took her breath away. "I love you," she said. "I love you both so much it scares me." "Fear is just love trying to protect itself," Marcus said, echoing Elena's wisdom. "And love this strong doesn't need protection, it needs celebration. There's something magical about watching love bloom in the ordinary moments. Shared meals, garden projects, quiet conversations under the stars." Victoria, Marcus, and Zoe are discovering that real love isn't about grand gestures or perfect moments. It's about showing up for each other every single day and choosing to build something beautiful together. What ordinary moment in your own life turned out to be extraordinary because of the love that filled it? Tell us about it in the comments. We love hearing about the small moments that changed everything. And if you're enjoying this journey of unexpected love, don't forget to hit that subscribe button because the best part of their story is still to come. That night, as they packed for their New York adventure, Victoria stood in Charlotte's room one last time. The space no longer felt like a memorial. It felt like a blessing, a reminder that love multiplies rather than divides, that opening your heart to new love doesn't diminish the old. "We're going to New York, Charlotte," she whispered to the butterfly paintings on the wall. "We're going to show the world what love looks like when it's brave enough to be itself." The room seemed to shimmer with approval, or maybe it was just the moonlight through the butterfly curtains. Either way, Victoria felt her daughter's blessing on this new chapter, this unlikely family, this love that had transformed them all. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, new opportunities to choose love over fear. But tonight they were home, all of them together, in the house that love had rebuilt from the ground up. The Plaza Hotel's presidential suite gleamed with the kind of luxury that had once defined Victoria's entire existence. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic rainbows across marble floors, and floor-to-ceiling windows offered a commanding view of Central Park's November tapestry. But all Victoria could focus on was Zoe's delighted squeal as she discovered the suite's second bedroom. "Daddy! Victoria! There's a bathtub big enough for a mermaid," Zoe called out, her voice echoing from the marble bathroom. She wore a bright turquoise dress with silver leggings that made her look like a small, earthbound fairy. Marcus appeared in the doorway, his travel-rumpled khakis and navy sweater a stark contrast to the suite's opulence. His eyes met Victoria's across the room, and she saw the subtle tension in his shoulders, the way he held himself when he felt out of place. "This is incredible," he said, but his voice carried an undertone of discomfort. "Are you sure this is necessary?" "I want you both to be comfortable," Victoria replied, smoothing her black silk blouse, armor chosen from habit, though she barely recognized the impulse anymore. "Besides, Zoe deserves to see New York in style." "I've never stayed anywhere this fancy," Zoe announced, bouncing on the king-sized bed. "It's like sleeping in a palace." Before Victoria could respond, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. The name on the screen made her stomach tighten. Patricia Hensworth, her ruthless board chairwoman and oldest business rival. "I have to take this," Victoria said apologetically. "Patricia." "Sterling." Patricia's voice cut through the phone like a blade. "We need to talk. Now. I'm with my family." "Your family?" Patricia's laugh was sharp as broken glass. "Since when do you have a family? More importantly, since when do you bring personal distractions to business crises?" Victoria moved to the window, lowering her voice. "What do you want, Patricia?" "What I want is for you to remember who you are. Harrison Industries is circling like vultures, and our stock price is hemorrhaging. The board is questioning your commitment, your focus, your ability to lead." "My ability has never been in question." "It is now. There are rumors, Victoria. Whispers that you've gone soft, that you're distracted by some construction worker and his child. Is it true?" Victoria's blood turned to ice. "How do you?" "I make it my business to know everything about my business partners. The question is, are you going to let personal weakness destroy everything you've built?" Through the phone, Victoria could hear the familiar sounds of the Sterling Industries war room. Keyboards clicking, phones ringing, the controlled chaos of corporate battle. It was a world she'd commanded for over a decade, a world where she'd earned respect through ruthlessness and fear. "I'll be there in an hour," she said. "Good. And Victoria? Leave the distractions at the hotel. This is about saving your empire, not playing house." Victoria ended the call, her hands shaking. When she turned around, Marcus was watching her with knowing eyes. "You have to go," he said. "It wasn't a question. Just for a few hours. There's an emergency board meeting and you're scared," he finished gently. "I can see it in your face." "I'm not scared," Victoria said automatically, then caught herself. "Actually, I am. I'm terrified that I'm going to walk into that room and remember who I used to be." Marcus crossed the room and took her hands. "Who you used to be isn't who you are now. You know that, right?" "Do I?" "Because 5 minutes ago, I felt the old Victoria clawing her way back to the surface. The one who would sacrifice anything for power, who measured worth in stock prices and market share. That's not the woman who spent 3 weeks planting butterfly gardens and teaching my daughter to paint. What if it is? What if this?" She gestured around the suite, encompassing their last month of happiness. "What if this has all been some kind of fantasy? A break from reality that's about to end?" Zoe appeared beside them, her small face serious. Are you going to leave us? No, sweetheart. I'm just going to a meeting. I'll be back before dinner. Promise? Victoria knelt down to Zoe's level, seeing her own fear reflected in the child's dark eyes. I promise. Double promise? Double promise. But as Victoria rode the elevator down to the plaza's marble lobby, she felt the familiar weight of corporate armor settling around her shoulders. Her phone buzzed with messages from board members, stock analysts, and financial reporters. The hostile takeover bid was worse than she'd imagined. Harrison Industries wasn't just trying to buy Sterling Industries, they were trying to destroy it. The Sterling Industries Manhattan office occupied 3 floors of a gleaming tower on Fifth Avenue. Victoria hadn't been here in 2 months, but nothing had changed. The same intimidating marble reception desk, the same oil paintings of stern-faced men in expensive suits, the same atmosphere of controlled aggression that had once felt like home. Ms. Sterling, her assistant Jeremy greeted her with relief. Thank God you're here. The board is in full panic mode. Status report, Victoria said, falling into step beside him as they walked toward the executive elevator. Harrison made their offer public an hour ago. $52 billion, all cash. Our stock jumped 12% on the news, but the board is split. Half want to take the money and run, half want to fight. And Patricia? She's leading the fight, but she's making it clear that she questions your recent priorities. The elevator doors opened onto the 42nd floor, revealing the Sterling Industries boardroom in all its intimidating glory. 20-foot ceilings, a conference table that could seat 30, and windows that offered a view of Manhattan that spoke of power and conquest. Patricia Hensworth stood at the head of the table, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, her black suit a mirror of Victoria's own armor. She was 65, brilliant, and utterly ruthless, everything Victoria had once aspired to be. Victoria, Patricia said without warmth. So good of you to join us. The other board members, 12 men and women who represented billions in investment capital, turned toward Victoria with expressions ranging from relief to skepticism. She recognized the look. They were measuring her, weighing her commitment, deciding whether she was still the shark they'd backed or had become something weaker. Gentlemen, ladies. Victoria took her seat at the head of the table, feeling the familiar rush of command. Let's discuss Harrison's pathetic attempt to buy what they could never build. For the next 3 hours, Victoria became the woman she'd been before Marcus and Zoe entered her life. She dissected Harrison's offer with surgical precision, identified their weaknesses, and outlined a defense strategy that would not only repel the takeover, but potentially position Sterling Industries for a counter-acquisition. Brilliant, said Robert Chin, the board's financial expert. This is the Victoria Sterling we know and trust. The question, Patricia said, her voice carrying an edge, is whether this Victoria Sterling is back to stay, or whether she's going to disappear again into domestic fantasies. My personal life is not the board's concern, Victoria replied coolly. It is when it affects your performance, when it affects our stock price, when it affects the confidence of our investors. My performance has never been stronger. Your performance has been non-existent for the past month. You've delegated critical decisions, missed important calls, and according to my sources, you've been playing house with a construction worker and his child. A murmur rippled around the table. Victoria felt her face flush with anger and embarrassment. My relationship status is irrelevant to my ability to lead this company. Is it? Patricia stood, moving to the window with predatory grace. Because I have reports that you've been seen at school plays, grocery stores, and children's birthday parties. That you've been cooking dinner and planting gardens instead of crushing competitors and building market share. I've been living my life. No, you've been living someone else's life. The Victoria Sterling I know doesn't do domestic. She doesn't do emotional. She doesn't let sentiment interfere with success. Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Zoe asked if we could order room service and watch movies together. She misses you. The simple message hit her like a physical blow. She could picture them in the hotel suite, Marcus probably helping Zoe with her homework, both of them waiting for her to return so they could explore the city together. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," Patricia said, noticing Victoria's distraction. 6 months ago, nothing could have pulled your attention away from a board meeting. Now you're checking personal messages during a corporate crisis. "The crisis is handled," Victoria said firmly. "I've outlined our defense strategy, identified our tactical advantages, and—" "You've given us a plan," Patricia interrupted. "But plans require execution. They require commitment. They require a leader who isn't going to be distracted by children's bedtime stories and romantic dinners." "I'm not distracted. Aren't you?" Patricia returned to her seat, her expression calculating. "Then prove it. Harrison's CEO, William Harrison, wants to meet tomorrow. Face to face. He's convinced he can buy you out personally, that you've lost your edge. Show him he's wrong." "Of course I'll meet with him." "Good. And Victoria, this meeting will determine the future of Sterling Industries. If you're not prepared to be the woman who built this empire, ruthless, focused, uncompromising, then perhaps it's time to consider Patricia's suggestion." "What suggestion?" Patricia smiled, and it was a predator's expression. "That you step down as CEO. Let someone with fewer distractions take control." The room fell silent. Victoria felt the weight of every board member's gaze, the pressure of expectations and judgments, and the brutal mathematics of corporate power. "I built this company," she said quietly. "I sacrificed everything for it. I won't step down." "Then prove you're still the Victoria Sterling we invested in," Patricia said. "Show us tomorrow that you're willing to do whatever it takes to win." Victoria left the meeting feeling hollowed out, as if Patricia had reached inside her chest and scooped out everything soft and warm. The elevator ride down felt like descending into a familiar hell, a place where love was weakness, where human connection was a liability, where power was the only currency that mattered. Her phone rang as she stepped onto Fifth Avenue. "Marcus, how did it go?" he asked, his voice warm with concern. "Complicated," she replied, hailing a taxi. "I'll be back soon." "Victoria, are you okay? You sound different." "I'm fine. Just tired." But she wasn't fine. As the taxi crawled through Manhattan traffic, Victoria felt the walls she'd spent the last month tearing down, rebuilding themselves brick by brick. Patricia's words echoed in her mind. Domestic fantasies, distractions, lost your edge. Had she lost her edge? Had she become weak, sentimental, distracted? The Victoria Sterling who had built a tech empire didn't cook dinner or plant gardens or attend school plays. She conquered markets, destroyed competitors, and never let emotion interfere with ambition. By the time she reached the plaza, Victoria had made a decision that would haunt her for years to come. She found Marcus and Zoe curled up together on the suite's massive sofa, watching The Princess Bride on the giant television. Zoe was in her pajamas, purple with silver stars, and Marcus had changed into jeans and a gray sweater that made his eyes look like storm clouds. "Victoria!" Zoe jumped up and ran to her, wrapping small arms around her waist. "You're back! Did you save your company?" "I'm working on it," Victoria said, but her voice sounded hollow even to her own ears. Marcus muted the television, his expression concerned. "What happened?" "Nothing I can't handle," she said, moving to the window to avoid his penetrating gaze. "But there's been a development. The situation is more serious than I thought." "What kind of development?" Victoria turned to face them, and for a moment, her resolve almost cracked. Zoe was looking at her with such trust, such innocent faith. Marcus's eyes held all the love and support she'd ever dreamed of finding. But Patricia's voice was louder. "Domestic fantasies, distractions, lost your edge." "I need to extend our trip," she said carefully. The takeover bid is aggressive, and it's going to take longer to resolve than I anticipated. How much longer? Marcus asked. I don't know. Weeks, maybe months. Months. Zoe's face fell. But what about the butterfly garden? What about Thanksgiving? What about our family dinners? The garden will wait, Victoria said, each word feeling like glass in her throat. And there will be other holidays. Victoria, Marcus said quietly, what aren't you telling us? She looked at him, this man who had taught her about love, about family, about what really mattered. This man who had shown her that she could be more than just a corporate predator, that she could be warm and giving and human. And she made the cruelest choice of her life. I'm telling you that this is who I am, she said, her voice growing colder with each word. I'm a CEO first, everything else second. I thought I could balance both worlds, but I was wrong. What are you saying? I'm saying that you and Zoe should go back to California. I'll have my assistant arrange first-class flights and... No. Marcus stood up, his face pale. Don't do this. Do what? Don't become the person you used to be. Don't throw away everything we've built because you're scared. I'm not scared. I'm being realistic. This is a $40 billion company, Marcus. I can't run it from butterfly gardens and school plays. You don't have to choose between loving us and running your company. Don't I? Victoria's voice rose, and she saw Zoe flinch. Because my board seems to think I do. My competitors think I do. My shareholders think I do. Who cares what they think? I care. Because without them, I'm nothing. Without this company, I'm just another rich widow with too much time and too much money. You're so much more than that, Marcus said desperately. You're kind and generous and funny. You're the woman who spent 3 weeks on her hands and knees planting flowers because a little girl asked you to. You're the woman who learned to make pancakes shaped like dragons because it made someone smile. That woman was a fantasy, Victoria said, and the words felt like poison on her tongue. A brief escape from reality. But this is reality, Marcus. This is who I really am. You're lying, he said simply. You're lying to yourself and to us. Am I? Because the woman you think you know doesn't exist in boardrooms and hostile takeovers. She doesn't survive in a world where one moment of weakness can destroy everything you've worked for. Then maybe that world isn't worth surviving in. Victoria laughed, and it was a sound without joy. Spoken like someone who's never had to build anything, never had to fight for anything, never had to prove they deserved to exist. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. She saw him step back, saw the hurt and betrayal in his eyes. You don't mean that, he said quietly. Don't I? You're a construction worker, Marcus. A good one, I'm sure, but you live in a world where success means a steady job and a decent apartment. I live in a world where success means conquering markets and crushing competitors. We're not the same. We fell in love, he said, his voice breaking. That made us the same. No, it made us foolish. Love doesn't pay for private schools or medical emergencies or retirement funds. Love doesn't build companies or create jobs or change the world. Love changes everything, Zoe said suddenly, her small voice cutting through the tension. You said so yourself. You said love was the most important thing. Victoria looked at this child who had brought light into her darkest corners, who had shown her what it meant to be part of a family. For a moment, her mask slipped, and she saw herself through Zoe's eyes, a woman choosing money over love, power over happiness, fear over faith. But Patricia's voice was stronger. Domestic fantasies, distractions, lost your edge. I was wrong, Victoria said, her voice like ice. I'm sorry, Zoe, but I was wrong. Love is a luxury I can't afford. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at her as if she'd become a stranger, which, Victoria realized, she had. Zoe's eyes filled with tears, and she pressed closer to Marcus's side. So that's it? Marcus asked. You're just going to throw us away? I'm being practical. You both deserve better than someone who can't give you the attention you need. We need you, Zoe whispered. We love you. You love who you thought I was, Victoria corrected. But that woman was never real. Marcus picked up Zoe, holding her close as she began to cry. Come on, Mija. Let's pack our things. Are we really leaving? Zoe asked through her tears. We're really leaving, Marcus said, his eyes never leaving Victoria's face. Some people forget who they are when they're scared. And some people remember exactly who they are. Which one is Victoria? Marcus was quiet for a long moment. I thought I knew. I was wrong. They packed in silence, their movements efficient and heartbreaking. Victoria stood at the window, watching the lights of Manhattan twinkle below, telling herself she was making the right choice. The practical choice. The choice that would save her company and secure her future. But when she heard the suite door close behind them, when she was alone with the crystal chandeliers and marble floors, and all the luxury that money could buy, Victoria Sterling, billionaire CEO, tech industry titan, woman who had everything, collapsed on the floor and wept. Sometimes the hardest battles we fight are against ourselves. Victoria just chose fear over love, power over happiness, and the familiar pain of isolation over the uncertain joy of vulnerability. We've all been there, that moment when we convince ourselves that we're not worthy of love, that we're safer alone, that the walls we've built are more reliable than the bridges others offer us. Have you ever sabotaged your own happiness because you were too scared to believe it could last? Share your story in the comments. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in our struggles is the first step toward healing. And if you're rooting for love to win in the end, hit that subscribe button because this story isn't over yet. Outside, snow began to fall on Manhattan, covering the city in a blanket of white that made everything look pure and new. But in the plaza's presidential suite, Victoria Sterling sat alone in the dark, surrounded by all the wealth and power she'd chosen over love, wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life. The answer would come tomorrow, when she would face William Harrison and discover that some victories cost more than any defeat, and that the woman who had everything was about to learn what it meant to have nothing at all. The Sterling Industries boardroom had never felt colder. Victoria sat at the head of the polished mahogany table, watching William Harrison enter with the confidence of a man who believed he'd already won. He was everything the business world expected, silver-haired, sharp-suited, with eyes like a hawk circling prey. Victoria, he said, taking the seat across from her. You look tired. I look focused, she corrected, her voice carrying the steel she'd forged over 15 years of corporate warfare. Is that what we're calling it now? Harrison smiled, pulling out a folder thick with documents. Because from where I'm sitting, you look like a woman who just threw away the only thing that made her human. Victoria's jaw tightened. You know nothing about me. I know you sent them away. The construction worker and his daughter. Patricia was quite thorough in her report. My personal life is not relevant. Harrison interrupted. Everything is relevant in our world, Victoria. Every weakness, every soft spot, every moment of humanity becomes ammunition. He slid a photograph across the table, a security camera image of her, Marcus, and Zoe at the butterfly garden, all three covered in dirt and laughing. Victoria stared at the photo, her chest constricting. They looked so happy, so complete, like a real family. Touching, Harrison continued. The Ice Queen learning to plant flowers. The billionaire playing mother to someone else's child. The untouchable Victoria Sterling falling in love with a man who probably makes in a year what you spend on a handbag. What's your point? My point is that you've already lost. You threw away the only thing that made you interesting, that made you real, that made you worth more than this. He gestured around the sterile boardroom. Expensive tomb you've built for yourself. I chose my company. You chose fear. Harrison leaned back, studying her with something that might have been pity. You want to know the ironic part? I was going to withdraw the takeover bid. Victoria's mask slipped. What? My daughter saw a news piece about you. Some fluff story about the humanization of Victoria Sterling. She said you looked happy for the first time in years. Said maybe we should leave you alone, let you have your fairy tale ending. But then you proved you're exactly who I thought you were. Someone so terrified of vulnerability that she'd rather rule in hell than serve in heaven. He pushed the takeover documents toward her. $52 billion all cash. You can walk away wealthy beyond imagination. I built this company from nothing. And what has it given you? An empty mansion? A reputation for ruthlessness? The respect of people who would sell you out for a percentage point. Victoria's phone buzzed. Without thinking, she glanced at it. A notification from the Plaza Hotel. Marcus had checked out 3 hours ago. They were really gone. Ah, Harrison said, noticing her reaction. Reality setting in? The only reality is that Sterling Industries will never be yours. Won't it? He stood, buttoning his jacket. I'll give you 48 hours to consider my offer. But Victoria, take some advice from someone who's been where you are. Empires built on isolation always fall. The only question is whether you'll have anyone left to catch you when they do. After he left, Victoria sat alone in the boardroom, surrounded by the trappings of her success. The leather chairs that had hosted billion-dollar deals. The windows that overlooked the city she'd conquered. The awards and accolades that proclaimed her a titan of industry. All of it felt like dust in her mouth. Her phone rang. Patricia. Well, the older woman demanded. Did you show him who's in charge? He's giving us 48 hours to consider. Good. That gives us time to marshal our defenses. I've already called Goldman Sachs about financing options. We can fight this, Victoria. We can win. Can we? Of course we can. As long as you're focused. As long as you're committed. As long as you're not distracted by. Victoria hung up. She walked to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. 20 stories below, Manhattan pulsed with life. Couples walked hand in hand. Parents pushed strollers. Families hurried toward Central Park, probably heading to the zoo or the carousel or any of the 1,000 small joys she'd never allowed herself to experience. Her reflection stared back at her. A woman in a $5,000 suit with perfectly styled hair and expertly applied makeup. A woman who had everything and nothing. A woman who had just thrown away the only real happiness she'd ever known because Patricia Hensworth had whispered her deepest fear, that she wasn't worthy of love. The door opened behind her. Jeremy, her assistant, entered hesitantly. Miss Sterling, your 3 o'clock is here. Cancel it. But it's the Samsung executives. They flew in from Seoul specifically. Cancel everything. Jeremy blinked. Everything. Every meeting. Every call. Every appointment. She turned from the window. And Jeremy? Book me a flight to Los Angeles. When? Now. But the Harrison deal. We'll be here when I get back. If I get back. Jeremy stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. Miss Sterling, are you feeling all right? No, Victoria said, and for the first time in days, it felt like the truth. I'm not all right. I just threw away the only people who ever loved me for who I am, not what I own. I chose fear over love, money over meaning, and a cold boardroom over a warm home. I don't understand. Neither did I. She grabbed her coat, her movements suddenly urgent. But I'm starting to. What about the board? What about Patricia? Tell Patricia she can run the meeting. Tell the board I'm handling a crisis. What crisis? The only one that matters. I'm about to lose my family. She was halfway to the elevator when her phone rang. An unknown number with a Los Angeles area code. Her heart leaped. Maybe it was Marcus. Maybe he was calling to. Miss Sterling? The voice was unfamiliar, clinical. This is Dr. Martinez at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. I'm calling about Marcus Chin. The world tilted. What about Marcus? There's been an accident. Mr. Chun and his daughter were in a collision on the 405. He's in surgery now, but he listed you as his emergency contact. Zoe is Zoe. The little girl has minor injuries. She's asking for you. Victoria was already running for the elevator. I'll be there in 6 hours. Ms. Sterling? She keeps saying you promised. Something about a double promise? The words hit like a physical blow. Victoria's double promise to come back, to choose them, to be the woman they believed she could be. A promise she'd broken for a boardroom and a bank account. Tell her I'm coming, Victoria said, her voice breaking. Tell her Victoria's coming home. The next 6 hours were the longest of Victoria's life. She chartered a private jet, pacing the cabin like a caged animal while the pilots pushed the aircraft to its limits. She called the hospital every 30 minutes, getting updates that ranged from hopeful to terrifying. Marcus was stable but critical. The surgery had gone well, but there were complications. Zoe had a broken wrist and bruised ribs, but was otherwise physically fine. Emotionally was another story. She wouldn't speak to anyone, wouldn't eat, wouldn't sleep. She just kept asking for Victoria. I'm coming, baby, Victoria whispered to the clouds racing past her window. I'm coming. She thought about all the moments she'd wasted, all the chances she'd thrown away. The morning coffees where Marcus would tell her about his dreams. The evening walks where Zoe would hold both their hands and swing between them. The quiet nights after Zoe was asleep, when she and Marcus would sit on the porch and plan a future she'd been too scared to believe in. Her phone buzzed with messages from New York. Patricia demanding to know where she was. Board members panicking about the Harrison deal. Financial reporters sensing blood in the water. Victoria deleted them all. For the first time in her life, she understood what really mattered. Not the company she'd built, or the fortune she'd amassed, or the fear she'd cultivated like armor. What mattered was a little girl in a hospital bed asking for the woman who'd promised to love her. What mattered was a man who'd seen past her walls and loved her anyway. What mattered was choosing love over fear, especially when it was terrifying. The plane touched down at LAX as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Victoria didn't wait for her luggage, didn't care about protocols or propriety. She ran through the airport like a woman possessed, her designer heels clicking against the tile, her carefully constructed image crumbling with every step. The taxi ride to Cedars-Sinai was a blur of traffic and prayer. She'd never been religious, but she found herself bargaining with any deity who might be listening. Let them be okay. Let me have another chance. Let me prove I can choose love. The hospital's pediatric ward was a world of bright murals trying to mask institutional fear. Victoria found Zoe's room by following the sound of silence, the kind of heavy, waiting quiet that comes when a child has cried themselves empty. She stood in the doorway, her heart shattering at the sight. Zoe looked so small in the hospital bed, her left arm in a bright purple cast, her face turned toward the window. A nurse sat beside her, speaking softly, but Zoe didn't respond. Zoe? Victoria's voice was barely a whisper. The little girl's head snapped around, and her eyes, those beautiful dark eyes that had first melted Victoria's defenses, widened with disbelief. Victoria? Her voice was hoarse, uncertain. Is it really you? It's really me, sweetheart. I'm here. You came back. I came back. Victoria crossed the room and carefully gathered Zoe into her arms, mindful of her injuries. I'm so sorry, baby. I'm so sorry. Zoe buried her face in Victoria's shoulder and began to sob, not the quiet tears of earlier, but the full body shaking of a child who'd been holding too much inside. I thought you didn't love us anymore, Zoe whispered between sobs. I thought we weren't good enough. No, sweetheart. Never think that. You're everything good in this world. I was the one who wasn't good enough. I was scared and stupid, and I made the worst mistake of my life. Daddy said you were just confused. He said sometimes grown-ups get scared and do silly things. Your daddy is a very wise man. Victoria pulled back to look at Zoe's face. How is he? Have you seen him? They won't let me. They say he's sleeping, but it's a special doctor's sleep, and I have to wait. Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. What if he doesn't wake up? What if he leaves like Mommy did? He's not going to leave, Victoria said firmly, though her own heart was racing with fear. Your daddy is the strongest person I know. He's going to wake up, and we're going to be a family. A real family this time. You promise? I double promise. Triple promise. All the promises in the world. The nurse, who had been watching quietly, stepped forward. Miss Sterling? Mr. Chun is out of surgery. He's been asking for you. Victoria's heart stopped. He's awake? In and out. But your name is the first thing he says each time he surfaces. Still holding Zoe's hand, Victoria followed the nurse through corridors that smelled of antiseptic and hope. The ICU was a world of machines and whispered prayers, where life hung on the thin thread between heartbeats. Marcus lay in bed 3, surrounded by monitors and tubes that made him look both fragile and fierce. His face was bruised, his body battered, but he was breathing. He was alive. Marcus? Victoria approached slowly, Zoe clinging to her side. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, then sharpening as they found her face. Victoria? His voice was rough, confused. But you sent us away. I was an idiot, she said simply. A scared, stupid idiot who threw away everything that mattered because I was too afraid to believe I deserved it. Daddy! Zoe reached for him with her good arm. Victoria came back. She said we're going to be a real family. Marcus's eyes moved between them, and Victoria saw the war playing out behind them. Hope battling against hurt, love fighting with the memory of betrayal. You chose your company, he said quietly. I chose wrong. Victoria took his hand, careful of the 4-line. I've spent my whole life building walls, Marcus. Keeping people out because I was terrified of being hurt again. Then you and Zoe came along and showed me that the only thing worse than being hurt is being alone. What about Sterling Industries? What about the takeover? Let them have it. Marcus blinked. What? Let them have it all. The company, the money, the power. None of it means anything without you and Zoe. I'd rather be broke and loved than rich and alone. You don't mean that. I've never meant anything more in my life. She squeezed his hand. I love you, Marcus Chin. I love your daughter. I love the life we were building together. And if you'll have me, if you can forgive me for being a coward and a fool, I want to spend the rest of my life proving that love matters more than any empire. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Victoria felt her heart hanging in the balance. She'd thrown him away, chosen fear over faith. She wouldn't blame him if he couldn't forgive her. Then, slowly, his fingers intertwined with hers. The butterfly garden is probably dead by now, he said. We'll plan a new one. Zoe's going to want a bigger one. With a fountain. She can have 10 fountains. And I still don't care about your money. I know. Victoria felt tears sliding down her cheeks. That's one of the million reasons I love you. 1,000,001, Zoe corrected, her face bright with hope. Because Daddy also makes really good pancakes. Marcus laughed, then winced as the movement pulled at his injuries. Come here, both of you. They leaned in carefully, creating a circle of 3, broken but healing, battered but whole. I love you too, Marcus whispered. Both of you. My girls. Does this mean we're a family now? Zoe asked. A real family? Victoria looked at this man who'd taught her about courage, at this child who'd taught her about joy, at this life she'd almost thrown away for fear and foolishness. The realest family, she confirmed. Outside the hospital window, Los Angeles glittered with promise. Somewhere in Malibu, an empty mansion waited to become a home. Somewhere in New York, a boardroom full of sharks circled her abandoned empire. But here, in this small circle of love and forgiveness, Victoria Sterling had everything she'd never known she needed. Her phone buzzed with another message from Patricia. Without looking, Victoria turned it off and dropped it in the trash. "What was that?" Marcus asked. "Nothing important," Victoria said, meaning it. "Just the past trying to call me back. And I'm not answering." She kissed his forehead gently. "I've got more important things to do." "Like what?" "Like learning to be a wife, a mother, a partner." She smiled through her tears. "Like proving that love isn't a weakness, it's the only strength that matters." As the sun set over Los Angeles, painting the hospital room in shades of gold and possibility, 3 broken people held each other and chose to heal together. They chose love over fear, connection over isolation, and the messy beauty of family over the cold perfection of success. And in that choice, they found something worth more than all the empires in the world. They found their way home to each other. 6 months later, the Malibu estate looked nothing like the cold monument to success it had once been. The butterfly garden had exploded into life, with monarchs and swallowtails dancing among the milkweed and lavender. Where manicured perfection once reigned, controlled chaos now bloomed. Zoe's art studio in the pool house, Marcus's workshop in the garage, and everywhere the evidence of a family actually living rather than just existing. Victoria stood at the kitchen window, watching Marcus teach Zoe to use a level on the treehouse they were building together. June sunshine poured over them like honey, and their laughter carried on the ocean breeze. Zoe's purple cast had been replaced by a faint scar on her wrist, a reminder of how close they'd come to losing everything. "You sure about this?" Marcus called up to her, holding up the plans they'd drawn together. "Once we put this beam in, there's no going back." "I'm sure about everything," Victoria called back, and meant it in ways that had nothing to do with construction. Her phone, a simple model now, not the latest executive gadget, buzzed with a text from her lawyer. The sale of Sterling Industries had been finalized that morning. $52 billion, all cash, just as Harrison had promised. She'd kept enough to ensure they'd never worry about money, donated a massive chunk to children's hospitals and educational foundations, and walked away from the rest without a backward glance. Patricia had called her insane. The board had threatened lawsuits. The business press had written scathing articles about the fall of Victoria Sterling. Victoria had never been happier. Ms. Chun, Rosa, their housekeeper, who had become more like family than staff, appeared in the doorway. "The delivery is here." Perfect timing. Victoria smoothed her sundress, yellow with tiny butterflies, a gift from Zoe, and headed for the front door. The delivery truck bore the logo of Chun and Sterling Construction, the company she and Marcus had started with her settlement money. Not a tech empire or a corporate dynasty, but a family business focused on building affordable homes for working families. Marcus ran the construction side, Victoria handled the business. Together, they were creating something that mattered. "Where do you want these?" the delivery driver asked, gesturing to boxes of tiles for their latest project. "Workshop, please." "My husband will show you where." "My husband." The words still sent a thrill through her, even 3 months after their wedding. It had been a small ceremony in the butterfly garden, with Zoe as the world's most enthusiastic flower girl, and a guest list that included Marcus's construction crew, Rosa's family, and exactly 0 billionaires or board members. As the driver unloaded, a familiar car pulled into the driveway. Victoria's stomach tightened with old reflexes before she reminded herself that she had nothing left to fear. Patricia Hensworth stepped out, looking oddly diminished outside her corporate armor. She wore a simple gray suit instead of her usual power ensemble, and her face showed every one of her 65 years. "Patricia," Victoria said neutrally, "this is unexpected. May I come in?" Victoria hesitated, then nodded. They sat on the porch, the same porch where she'd first watched Marcus teach Zoe about constellations, where she'd learned that success meant more than numbers on a spreadsheet. The company is gone, Patricia said without preamble. Harrison broke it up, sold the pieces. Everything we built, scattered to the winds. I'm sorry you're hurting. Patricia's laugh was bitter. Are you? You walked away from a $50 billion empire for this. She gestured at the house, the garden, the sounds of family life drifting from the backyard. Yes, Victoria said simply. I did. I don't understand. You were the best of us. Ruthless, brilliant, unstoppable. You could have had everything. I do have everything. You have a construction worker and someone else's child. I have a husband who loves me for who I am, not what I own. I have a daughter who teaches me something new every day. I have a home filled with laughter instead of echoes. I have a business that builds homes for families instead of destroying competitors. Victoria leaned forward. Tell me, Patricia, what do you have? The older woman was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was smaller than Victoria had ever heard it. I have a penthouse with a view of the city. I have a portfolio worth hundreds of millions. I have a reputation that makes grown executives tremble. She paused. I have no one who would notice if I didn't wake up tomorrow. It's not too late to change that, isn't it? I'm 65 years old. I've spent my entire life building walls. I don't know how to tear them down. Start with one brick, Victoria said gently. That's all. One brick, one choice, one moment of vulnerability. It's terrifying, but it's worth it. Patricia stood abruptly. I should go. I just wanted to see. I wanted to understand why you chose this. Stay for dinner, Victoria offered impulsively. Rosa's making tamales. Zoe would love to show you her art studio. I don't belong here. Neither did I once. But family isn't about belonging. It's about choosing to show up anyway. Patricia hesitated at the porch steps, her lifetime of armor warring with the loneliness Victoria could now recognize in her eyes. Before she could decide, Zoe came running around the corner, paint splattered and beaming. Victoria, Daddy says the treehouse is ready for, oh. She stopped short, studying Patricia with curious eyes. Hello, I'm Zoe. Are you here for dinner? No, I was just. You should stay, Zoe said decisively. Rosa's tamales are the best in the whole world. And I can show you my paintings. I did one of Victoria's butterfly garden. Do you like butterflies? Patricia looked at this child who radiated the kind of warmth she'd spent a lifetime avoiding. I don't know. I've never really thought about them. That's okay, Zoe said, taking Patricia's hand without hesitation. Victoria didn't know about them either at first. But now she loves them. Sometimes you just need someone to teach you. Victoria watched something crack in Patricia's expression. The same breaking she'd felt in herself that first day in the untouched bedroom, when a stranger's child had shown her what she'd been missing. All right, Patricia said quietly. I'll stay for dinner. As Zoe led their unexpected guest toward the house, chattering about butterflies and tree houses and her latest art project, Marcus appeared at Victoria's side. His arms slipped around her waist, solid and sure. Patricia Hensworth at our dinner table, he mused. Never thought I'd see the day. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption, Victoria said. Even corporate sharks. Speaking from experience? The best kind. She turned in his arms, drinking in the sight of him. Paint in his hair, sawdust on his clothes, love in his eyes. Thank you. For what? For seeing who I could be. For waiting while I figured it out. For catching me when I finally jumped. Always, he said simply, and kissed her. They were interrupted by Zoe's voice from inside. Patricia, you're holding the brush too tight. Art is about feeling, not controlling. Here, let me show you. Victoria laughed. Think we've created a monster? The best kind, Marcus echoed. Come on, Mrs. Chin. Let's go save Patricia from our daughter's art lesson. Our daughter. The words settled in Victoria's chest like coming home. The dinner table that night was a study in contrasts. Patricia, stiff with decades of practiced distance, slowly thawing under Zoe's relentless warmth. Rosa's family filling the air with rapid Spanish and laughter. Marcus's crew stopping by with their wives and children, turning dinner into an impromptu party. Victoria watched it all from her seat at the head of the table. Not the cold throne of a CEO, but the warm center of a family she'd chosen and built with love instead of ambition. "A toast," Marcus said, raising his beer. "To second chances." "To family," Rosa added. "To butterflies," Zoe chimed in. "To." Patricia hesitated, then raised her water glass with something that might have been a smile. "To learning new things." They clinked glasses, a mismatched symphony of crystal and plastic, beer bottles and juice boxes. As the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Victoria felt the last of her old life slip away like an outgrown skin. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Tech World mourns the loss of Sterling Industries. She deleted it without reading. That world, that woman, that life, they belonged to the past. "Daddy, tell the story about how you met Victoria," Zoe requested, settling into her favorite spot between them. "Again?" Marcus laughed. "You've heard it 100 times. "I like it," Zoe said simply. "It reminds me that good things happen when you're brave." So Marcus told the story, with Victoria adding details and Zoe correcting them both when they got something wrong, according to her memory. Patricia listened with an expression of wonder, as if she'd never heard a love story before. Maybe she hadn't. "And then what happened?" Zoe prompted, though she knew the answer. "And then," Victoria said, pulling her close, "we became a family." "The best family," Zoe corrected. "The best family," Victoria agreed. Later, after Patricia had left with a promise to come back next week, after Rosa's family had headed home, after Zoe had fallen asleep between them on the couch, Victoria and Marcus sat on their porch watching the stars. "Any regrets?" Marcus asked quietly. Victoria thought about Sterling Industries, about the empire she'd built and abandoned, about the power she'd wielded and surrendered. Then she looked at her husband, at their daughter visible through the window, at the home they'd created together. "Just one," she said. Marcus tensed. "What?" "That it took me so long to figure out what really mattered." He relaxed, pulling her closer. "You figured it out when it counted. Almost too late. But not too late. That's what matters." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the ocean and the distant sound of butterflies' wings in the garden. Somewhere in New York, executives were probably pulling all-nighters, fighting for market share, measuring their worth in stock prices and profit margins. Victoria had measured her life that way once. Now she measured it in Zoe's laughter, in Marcus's steady presence, in the homes they built for families who needed them. She measured it in butterfly gardens and family dinners, in second chances and chosen love. "I love you," she said, the words still feeling like a miracle she got to speak. "I love you too," Marcus replied. "All of you. Even the parts that tried to push us away." "Especially those parts," Victoria said. "They're the ones that needed love the most." As if summoned by their conversation, a butterfly landed on the porch railing, a monarch, wings spread wide in the moonlight. It rested there for a moment, a reminder of transformation and new beginnings, before flying off into the night. "Make a wish," Marcus said. "I don't need to," Victoria replied. "I already have everything I could ever want." And she did. Not the cold perfection of corporate success or the hollow victory of conquered markets, but the messy, beautiful, complicated truth of a life lived with love. She had a husband who saw her truly, a daughter who taught her joy, and a future bright with possibility. The billionaire CEO who had once measured her worth in dollars and deals was gone. In her place stood Victoria Chin, wife, mother, builder of homes and keeper of butterflies. A woman who had learned that the greatest courage wasn't in building walls but in tearing them down, that the greatest success wasn't in what you owned but in who you loved, and that the greatest transformation came not from power, but from vulnerability. As they headed inside, Marcus carrying a sleeping Zoe, Victoria paused at the threshold of their home. The mansion that had once echoed with emptiness now hummed with life. Children's artwork covered the refrigerator. Work boots sat beside designer heels in the mudroom. The formal dining room had been converted into Zoe's homework station. It was messy. It was imperfect. It was absolutely everything. Coming to bed? Marcus asked softly. In a minute, Victoria said. I just want to remember this. Remember what? The moment I realized I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Marcus smiled, understanding in his eyes. Take your time. We'll be waiting. We'll be waiting. Not the cold silence of an empty mansion or the hollow ring of a boardroom, but the warm promise of family, of belonging, of home. Victoria Sterling had built an empire and walked away from it all. But Victoria Chen had built something far more valuable, a life worth living, a love worth choosing, and a family worth every sacrifice. As she finally headed upstairs to join her husband and daughter, a butterfly flew past the window, its wings catching the light from their bedroom. A reminder that sometimes the most beautiful transformations come from letting go of who we thought we had to be and embracing who we really are. And who Victoria really was, she'd discovered, was not a CEO or a billionaire or a corporate warrior. She was a woman who chose love over fear, family over fortune, and happiness over the hollow promise of having it all. She was finally and completely home. Sometimes the greatest success isn't measured in dollars or achievements, but in the courage to choose love over fear, connection over isolation, and vulnerability over control. Victoria's journey reminds us that it's never too late to rewrite our story, to choose differently, to build a life based on what truly matters. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as interesting as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.